stops, no one knows. We're going head into the unknown. Na, 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 na.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Will you please state your full name?
My name is Daniel Hellwig. First name is Daniel, D-A-N-I-E-L. Last name Hellwig, H-E-L-L-W-I-G.
And what do you do for a living?
I'm currently the forensic director at Intermountain Forensics. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, and our main mission is pushing forward new and cutting-edge DNA technologies, assisting different agencies, law enforcement, and otherwise with education, training, and consultation on those. Our main focus right now is to help fund these cases specifically, and most of our mission is revolved around forensic investigative genetic genealogy, or FIGG.
When you say help fund these cases as a nonprofit, what do you mean?
A variety of different. We actually allow people to submit cases. They may be having problems getting the revenue and resources to move it forward, and then we evaluate it. So this could be like we've worked and tried to assist in. Mainly, I think most of our work is in smaller agencies that don't have nearly as much resources to further their case work with this technology. But we've done work with law enforcement, medical examiners' offices, and defense, especially the Innocence Project.
What did you do before you worked at this nonprofit?
I've been in forensic DNA for 20 plus years. I have a bachelor's in biology and chemistry from Viterbo University and a master's in forensic science from Marshall University. I started my career at the Armed Forces DNA Identification Laboratory as an intern there and moved on to various public laboratories. I worked in forensic DNA at New Mexico Department of Public Safety and the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. I then started in the private sector. I worked for Sorensen Forensics in Salt Lake City, Utah, in a variety of different jobs there. Initially, I was the DNA technical leader, essentially the quality manager of the DNA section, but moved into executive management as the laboratory director. In 2019, I began with Intermountain Forensics as a founder. I'll refer to that sometimes as IMF. We were up until July of last year, our mission was not only funding cases, education outreach, but also we established and operated a fully functioning forensic DNA lab. Our mission in that realm was to, again, continue with cutting-edge DNA technology, and specifically we sought out to operate and utilize a forensic investigative genetic genealogy support laboratory.
What does that mean?
So our goal in this, we had fully functioning laboratory in that we did what I'll call traditional forensics, STRs, as mentioned previously, but we also wanted to implement this new technology, forensic investigative genetic genealogy, and laboratory processes behind it. Specifically in this case, you're talking about forensic SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms.
I'm sorry.
Single nucleotide polymorphism.
Whoa there, partner. So you need to slow down a little bit. You don't enunciate particularly well, and so you need to go slower.
I promise.
Let me see if I can understand your work right. Before the 501c3, getting into the forensic investigative genetic genealogy world, do I understand that your work was to do all the log steps until you get to the SNP, and then it would be handed off for a genealogist to do the other part of the work?
Beyond just identifying SNPs, it is to generate and upload a file and end product that would then be handed off to an investigative genetic genealogist to continue that research. So essentially, our laboratory had the ability to start from evidentiary item, to a DNA extraction, which is essentially popping cells open, pulling the DNA out, and washing all the residual material away. And then traditional forensics, where you're doing short tandem repeats, repetitive DNA that repeats over and over, and you simply count them to our specific targets, which was SNPs, where we do DNA sequencing, looking at all the different letters within that genome and pulling out the relevant single nucleotide polymorphisms that were specifically associated through genealogy, generating through a pretty extensive process what I'll call an upload file. These are files that contain all of these SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms, that contain the information that is needed for upload into these databases.
Okay. I'm going to go back a little bit with you. So in the traditional STR, we've heard some about that today. You said splitting the DNA open and washing it?
Yes, that's essentially the very simplified version of a DNA extraction. You can think of this biological material, these cells, as little tiny water-filled balloons with nuclear material, with DNA inside of it. So DNA extraction, similar to the previous testimony, is just popping those cells open, pulling the DNA out and washing all the cellular garbage, if you will, out to generate an extract. It can then go down several different pathways depending on what you need. Like traditional forensic testing, like STR, short tandem repeats, is taking that DNA and looking at repetitive sequences and counting how many repeats there are. The best way I can explain this is if you had the word cat, and that was the specific DNA letters that you were looking at, you could repeat that word cat 8 times. That would be a short tandem repeat. Cat repeated 8 times. I would call that an 8. You have DNA from mom and dad, so you have 2 copies of this. So you have an 8 and maybe another 8 from mom and dad. The problem there is that you're not actually looking at the specific letters. So a 3-letter word like dog would be completely different. We've got an 8 repeat STR and an 8 repeat STR that have different sequences, but still have the same short tandem repeat number. The SNP's single nucleotide polymorphisms is actually looking at the DNA sequence. So if we were to look at a SNP, let's say we were particularly interested in the A in cat, we would sequence that DNA and then go into that sequence and say, at this location we have an A, and we have an A from mom and maybe an A from dad. This is the generation of an SNP profile. Same concept, but we're dialing down to the specific letter in question.
Have you done both kinds of work?
Yes, and my before IMF, I worked at several different laboratories, all using traditional forensics, STRs and YSTRs. And my work at Intermountain Forensics, we did that, but we also focused on forensic SNP testing.
If I understood the part about the water balloon right, it's one water balloon, same process of popping it open, stripping out the stuff you don't need, and then it's where you go from there that makes the difference between STR and a SNP, ultimately.
Correct. It's all associating to the same DNA extract, and that's similar to what the Idaho State Police Lab does as well.
So the process of getting that DNA water balloon open so that you can strip things off, does it matter how you do that?
Well, there's a variety of different ways to do that, but in forensics, there's some specific and kind of common tools that we use that the process to get there can vary somewhat. However, it's fairly standard practice to use some of the same tools within the forensic DNA community.
I think I understood the repeats as looking for patterns, but the SNP is looking at the individual characteristic.
Individual letter, like a nucleotide. So if DNA is made up of billions and billions of letters, STR is looking at repetitive sequences and counting the repeats. And SNPs is looking at a specific letter, like specific nucleotides on that genome.
All right, I want to talk about the whole process. How do you get from a SNP to splitting the water balloon open? I'm with you there. So what do we do after we get that stripped off?
Well, if you go down the path of forensic SNPs, there's a very different way you can do that. There's one way that is essentially a targeted practice. We're looking at SNPs in question, and we're going to focus on those SNPs and do what is called an amplification PCR. basically a DNA photocopier of that sequence. That specific letter and a little bit around it to specifically target the SNP in question. The other technique is something more attuned to whole genome sequencing. Again, there's a variety of different ways you could do this, but the idea here is we're going to sequence the entire genome, the entire length of the DNA on this particular extract, and then we're going to pull out the SNPs that we need, the relevant ones that we're looking for. This can be done, I will refer to that as whole genome sequencing, acknowledging the fact that there's a variety of different ways you could accomplish that. Once you sequence the DNA, it comes out off of the instrument in question, and there's several different instruments you can use. But for the most part, it turns into raw data, and that raw data is typically found in a file called FASTQ file. This raw data is massive. It has an insane amount of information, and it's not refined in a way that we can actually utilize it. So the steps from taking that raw data to actually getting that upload file, that end product, for upload into these databases is bioinformatics, essentially a software that goes into these massive amounts of data and pulls out the things that we're looking for.
Is all software the same, or all bioinformatics programs? Is that all the same?
No. Each, as far as I can tell, each laboratory has their own version of bioinformatics that they use to get from sequence data into usable results.
If I understand where we are, we popped open the balloon, we put the DNA in a sequencer, created a raw data file called a FASTQ file, and now we need to do the bioinformatics to get a SNP?
Right.
Okay, what happens from there?
So in the bioinformatic pathway, you do multiple things. Again, you can think of this as a DNA sequence that the sequencer has given you a truckload of information. They're essentially puzzle pieces. The first thing we are going to do is re-emerging. So we're going to take all the puzzle pieces that are the same, and we're going to use them to paint this best picture of that information. You could think of this as we're sequencing this DNA. So this human genome multiple times, hopefully 10, 15, 30 times. Our samples in forensics are typically difficult, so we don't tend to get that much level of essentially we're trying to sequence this entire genome multiple times to add more context into what we're getting. In merging, we're taking the DNA sequences that we have multiple copies of, and we're combining them into one, the best fit for that particular fragment of DNA. Well, we still have puzzle pieces to put together, so the next thing is mapping. The bioinformatic pathway will map all of these puzzle pieces and put them into human genome in the way that they're supposed to be. That takes multiple fragments and lines them up in the right manner. Once it's mapped, we're going to start to be able to find the particular SNPs that we're looking for. We have human genome with a whole bunch of different letters and different positions. We could say, all right, these are the relevant SNPs that we're looking for, genealogy-based informative markers. We want to pull these SNPs out. So what the call is there and send that up to the upload file. In some cases, we don't have all of the information. We're missing some sequence data. We've maybe gotten 80% of the genome and some of the SNPs are missing. There's a process to fill in those gaps called imputation. Imputation is most bioinformatic packages. Essentially, we know what the letters are in front of this particular spot we're missing, and we know what the letters are behind this particular spot that we're missing. So we can look at all the human genomes and input, estimate the most likely letter in the position that we're looking for. Once we're through imputation and allele calls, we're going to use this bioinformatic package to pull out SNPs that we're looking for and put them into a format that we will be usable for upload into these databases. In IMF, we actually generated 2 files, one specifically to the GenMatch Pro database and one specifically to Family Tree FTDNA database. In these files, like GenMatch Pro, we typically get 550,000 plus SNPs that we're looking for, and the Family Tree DNA database upwards to 600 to 650,000 SNPs. The end product there, though, is a text file or some sort of upload file, which could be in text form or Excel format. But essentially what it is a file with all of these SNPs, the calls and the SNP locations in a format that allows them to be uploaded into the database At this point, we hand it off to an investigative genetic genealogist to do the research.
The upload databases, you mentioned two, GEDmatch Pro and Family Tree DNA.
That's correct.
Why did you mention those?
Well, those are the two databases that allow law enforcement searches. They have specific terms of service that give a portion of that database, those that have consented to do so, to law enforcement to search in for human remains in some cases and in criminal cases.
So in this lab process to get to the SNP, to get to the upload file, it sounds like there's a lot of steps along the way.
It's a pretty complicated process, yes.
Is it important to keep lab notes or bench notes or have procedures or protocols?
Yes, and I think that it is pretty standard practice amongst forensic DNA testing laboratories in general. Where you're going to adhere to a quality management system. You're going to have procedures, protocols, and policies that tell you what to do, tell you how to do it, tell you what samples to use, what personnel can do the analysis and the technical review, and so on and so forth. It's a whole quality structure that gives support and credence to reliable results. And that would include protocols like SOPs, standard operating procedures. It would include case documentation, laboratory notes about what you did, how you did it, chain of custody documents, electronic records as needed. And hopefully at the end of it, a report that includes conclusions and information about what was done.
Why do you want to do all that?
I don't know why I want to do any of this, to be honest.
God.
Well, first of all, within the forensic DNA community, it's a part of our accreditation process and some of the standards that we adhere to as a community. Second, it's just best practice. The holding of the records, using them to creating them and retaining them. You never know if you're going to need to refer back to them in your own notes, or we mandate a technical review of all of this data. So a second quality analyst will look over all of your laboratory notes, all the work you did and your reports, and make sure they agree with it, and would come out to the same conclusion and for discovery requests. At IMF, we have typical documentation that we would send to our clients that would include a report and all of the case notes and laboratory documentation associated with that. Outside of that, we oftentimes get requests for more than that information. What is our validations? What is our quality manual? Competency tests for our personnel, their training and education. A whole list of support documents that were within our quality management system that also are important in accreditation of our laboratory.
Before you became a 501c3, was your laboratory accredited?
Well, even previous to becoming a 501c3, since the inception of the company back in 2019, even before we no longer did laboratory operations, we got accredited by ANAB ISO 17025. That was on our accreditation scope, included traditional forensics, STRs, YSTRs, and eventually we included within our scope forensic SNPs. Massively parallel sequencing. That encompasses accreditation for this whole genome sequencing in support of our forensic investigative genetic genealogy that we did.
Is there a set of guidelines or rules that apply to work with DNA to split the DNA water balloon open?
Oh, yes, and I think you've heard testimony to that. There's accreditation standards. ISO 17025 is the big one, as well as the Federal Bureau of Investigation Quality Assurance Standards. For forensic DNA testing laboratories, those are common. I would say more so almost required within the forensic DNA community. And those are standards that dictate our quality management system as a whole. What we do, how we do it, how we support it, how we document, and how we report.
Is that important? So there's public trust in what you do?
More so public trust for sure, but reliability and reproducibility of results, transparency, and just ensuring a full quality behind your conclusions and your reports.
Mr. Hellwig, you mentioned the size of the two SNP profiles for GEDmatch Pro and Family Tree DNA. 550,000 or 650,000 seem to be the maximums. If you had a case where you had produced a file to upload, an upload file, and it had, let's say, 600,000 in it, could you take that text file and turn it into twice that big?
I'm not sure how we would do that, no. An important note here, though, is that that was just IMF's policy. We generated upload files specific to each one of those databases. And that's the number we had within our bioinformatic package. That's not necessarily what would be true of others. That being said, if theoretically we were to deliver our upload file to our client and it, say, had 500,000 SNPs on it, I don't know if a mechanism to add SNPs in that manner without going back to our raw DNA.
In this particular case, I know you haven't gotten involved in all of the ins and outs, but did we provide to you what we received in regular discovery, the Courtroom file and the FBI file upload files?
Yes, I did receive two upload files. One was a text file that came from Author Labs, and one was an Excel file that came from the FBI.
Is that also an upload file?
Yes, both of them are upload files. They contain exactly that, a listing of SNPs, the call, and their location and format that would allow them to be uploaded to databases.
What was the difference in size?
Well, the FBI upload file had significantly more SNPs called than the author file. I wasn't able to go deep into it. I don't know exactly how many more, but there were more SNPs called within the upload file for the FBI than there was for the author file.
And since the Courtroom file is smaller and it's a text file, can you tell how the FBI got so much more data, so many more SNPs?
No, that's kind of the important part here. There's no documentation to say how this happened, and that's really the important part, right? I have no reason to believe that Author Laboratories did anything wrong to obtain their profile. I just don't have the documentation to show me how that came to be. Same with the FBI file. There's no documentation or notes or bench or report to say this is what I had, this is what I did, and this is not what I have. So I'm unsure of how that came to be.
Thank you. Your Honor, if I may have just a moment to check with my team.
You may.
Mr. Helwig, that's all I have. The prosecutor might have some for you.
Go ahead, Mr. Nye.
Mr. Helwig, let's start with your accreditation testimony. Did I hear you correctly that your lab was accredited since inception in 2019?
Well, our laboratory was accredited for traditional forensics. We began the accreditation in 2019, and I believe the first accreditation scope we received was in 2020. For forensic SNPs, our accreditation was January 20th of 2023, I believe.
So you were accredited back in 2019 for forensic SNPs, correct?
Correct. We weren't actually doing forensic SNPs at the time.
But you were working on forensic SNP cases prior to your accreditation, correct?
No, we specifically reserved working on those SNP cases until we received our accreditation.
Okay. Do you recall describing accreditation process as a chicken and egg problem?
I don't.
You testified you work for Intermountain Forensics?
That's correct.
Do you post on their website?
Sometimes, yeah.
Do you post in your name Danny
certainly.
Helwig?
Certainly I do, yeah.
You don't recall posting in June of 2020 about accreditation being a chicken and egg problem?
No, I don't recall. I'm certain that that statement is on there, and I would need to recollect, certainly.
I'm happy to show this to you.
Well, that would be great.
Miss Taylor.
May I also see it?
Sure.
Yes, yeah, I recall that.
Okay, so now, do you recall describing accreditation as a chicken and egg problem?
Absolutely. It was several years ago. I appreciate that refresh of memory.
Sure. In that same post, you talked about how you appreciated the trust of those that were using you before you were accredited, right?
Correct, yes.
Do you feel like your work before accreditation was a lower quality than after accreditation?
No, absolutely not.
I also want to talk to you about, you mentioned that Intermountain Forensics does, or at least used to do, some cases like this, right?
Yes.
Assisting law enforcement?
Correct, yes.
Roughly how many cases did you assist law enforcement
That's a good question. We have running total there, but I'm guessing in the hundreds.
in? Okay. And what was your role, personally, in assisting law enforcement in those cases?
I had several. I did consultations up front. I was qualified as an analyst for forensic S&Ps. I did some technical review, and in some cases, I distributed files to our clients.
And when you say in the hundreds, you mean you went through the whole process you talked about with Ms. Taylor in hundreds of cases,
Yes.
developing a snip profile?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And all of those cases, were you successful in developing a snip profile?
No.
In roughly how many cases were you successful in developing a snip program?
Well, we were about at the end of laboratory operations. We were at about 80%, somewhere in that range.
So 80% of hundreds.
Yeah, I believe so.
In the cases you successfully developed a snip profile, did you learn medical information about the individuals whose DNA you were looking at?
No.
Did anyone at Intermountain Forensics learn medical information about those people?
No.
When you develop, I believe you call it an upload file, is that correct?
Correct.
What does an upload file look like if you just open it on a computer?
Well, it's a text file, very, very big. Again, it comes in different formats, but essentially what it is a text file. It is a big text file that has hundreds of thousands, in our case, of S&Ps that have a position, a name, what chromosome they're found on, and the actual letters that we're looking for.
Mm-hmm. So, if you provided that upload file to someone that didn't have any training or experience in genetics, would they be able to read it?
Not in so much words. There's some headers on there, I guess, that would be narrative, but the molecular biology would be pretty complicated.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask it this way, I guess. If you were to hand that upload file to your average police officer and ask them whether or not the person whose DNA you're looking at would have cancer, would that officer be able to do that?
No.
What additional steps would you need to take to learn medical information from a SNP program above and beyond what you were doing at Intermountain Forensics?
Well, the S&Ps are informative to a variety of different things. So what we're looking for is genealogy and for informative markers or ancestry link informative markers. To find health information or phenotypical like hair color, eye color, you need to look at different S&Ps. There's a horde of research on that medical information is out there and what S&Ps are probative. To gain access to those S&Ps, you'd have to go back into the Bioinformatics, pull the information from the raw data, specifically the medical S&Ps that you're looking for. That's not something we did at IMF.
So, if I'm understanding correctly, at IMF, you developed SNP SNP profiles, but they were specific for ancestry.
Genealogy and ancestry, yes.
Why didn't you develop SNPs related to medical information?
That's not part of our scope. We are a forensic DNA testing laboratory. We're generating FIGG profiles for the support and upload into these genealogy databases. it wouldn't be relevant, nor probative, nor appropriate.
Did you, when you helped these law enforcement agencies, did you ever follow those cases to see if there were successes at the end, like people going to prison? Sorry, I said that out loud.
Knife sheath. Sometimes we delivered files to our partners. In some cases, we had an investigative genetic genealogy team that worked the cases on the investigation side. But in some cases, our clients would come back to us and let us know that they've gotten a result or that they have a case resolution.
And you participate in the, I don't know exactly what you called it, in the FIG community? Would you consider yourself a member of the FIG community?
I guess, yeah. There's a variety of different groups, I guess, and message boards and information pathways. And I try to be a part of that where I can.
Fun. As a member of the FIG community, did you hear about other people's success stories using FIG?
Oh, absolutely.
Have you ever heard of a FIG case that was successfully solved using medical information?
No, never.
Just 1 second, Your Honor. Scruffle. No further questions.
Any redirect?
Yes, thank you. Full genome sequencing is the whole genome, everything. Is that what that means?
Yes, the whole genome sequence is the attempt to sequence the entire genome if possible.
Now, I heard you talking to the prosecutor about what you didn't look at with medical information, but I thought I heard you talk about when you got down to the SNP, those SNPs weren't called from the whole genome. Did I hear that right?
I would have to rephrase that a little bit.
Please do.
When we're dealing with a whole genome sequencing, we're attempting to sequence the entire genome. It turns into that raw file, that FASTQ file that I mentioned before. Now, the next step is the bioinformatic pathway. The bioinformatic pathway is going to be targeting specific SNPs in question that we want to solve the question for. We want to answer the question for. In our case, these are genetic genealogy or ancestry informative markers, those SNPs that provide information for genealogy and ancestry. The bioinformatics that we would use at IMF would be specifically targeting those particular SNPs. But the raw data, the sequence data, still has the entire list of SNPs. We just aren't pulling that piece of information out.
So if you handed me a case with your notes, protocols, and procedures, I could look at what you did at whole genome sequencing and know you were targeting only genealogy SNPs. Would that be fair to say?
Well, with the right knowledge base, yes. The list of SNPs are included where they are, and the name on the upload file are all there. You can do the research to look at that and say, okay, these are the genealogy or ancestry informative markers.
If I had a file with notes that talked about how bioinformatics was used, what to produce, what kind of SNPs to produce, and handed it to somebody like you, could you tell me these are the ones that go to ancestry issues or that go to genealogy issues if I had the notes from somebody else?
I would have to do some research, to be honest with you. The SNPs in question that we're using are all derived from these genealogy databases. So it's the GenMatch Pro, Family Tree DNA, Ancestry.com. Those are the ones who have decided which SNPs to use. And we just use them as a tool. So what is the SNPs that best upload into the Family Tree DNA law enforcement database or GenMatch Pro? And so when we're bioinformatically pulling out the SNPs, we're doing so under the direction of what they want from us. Could I determine if there's a medical information within those SNPs or SNPs with medical information? Yes, but it would be a lot of research.
I just have a couple of questions for you about what the prosecutor talked about besides that. He asked you about the chicken and egg problem and different cases you've done and the hundreds of cases that you've done before. You told us that it's important to have protocols and procedures and keep your information, keep your notes. Did you do that in those cases?
Oh, yes, yes. Within the quality management system as a whole and adhering to our procedures and protocols and the accreditation standard that we derive to, it's all that. It's case documentation, laboratory report, and then foundation behind it. Validation summaries, competency testing for personnel, their educational requirements, all that has to be done in those cases and adhered to in our own internal policies.
Thank you. That's it for me.
Well, thank you. That's all been very, very fascinating. You can step down. Does the defense have any other witnesses?
Your Honor, for the IGG, I have one other witness this morning.
For the love of God. How long is that one?
I think she's a little bit longer.
Oh, Jesus.
Take 30-ish minutes for lunch. Are we going to go right now? Keep going?
Yes.
Well, I got to switch it out. So give me. We'll take
back on the record. The defendant and counsel are all present. Defense, you may call your next witness.
I'm not a next witness yet. You got to give me a minute.
Jesus H. Christ.
Hippler's like, my eyes are going cross. Are we still talking about DNA?
No
How much
wonder
could
he
be
was in
said
such a
about
bad
DNA, for
mood.
heaven's sake?
Okay, so people were asking about why they brought up the medical stuff. Oh, that's because one of the things that Ann Taylor was fighting when this very first came up was that by utilizing these SNPs, that essentially they're just giving out people's medical information to all these law enforcement officers, and like how it violates HIPAA and all of this stuff about privacy violations and so on and so forth. But that, that's not an argument that she made during this hearing. I think she's dropped that from what I can tell. I don't think
it was the previous hearing, because I remember Andrea talking about it, and because also the thing is that just because he said that they didn't use medical information or they didn't access medical information doesn't mean they can't access medical information. They can.
Well, I think the whole point for the prosecutor is that you're giving these, your lab is creating these profiles, and you're giving the profile to law enforcement. Law enforcement doesn't know how to fucking read these profiles, so they can't go around being like, "Ooh, this person's got cancer." They don't know how to read it, because it essentially the sequencing they're giving is just a ginormous string of numbers.
Well, that's assuming that there's not somebody on law enforcement with that expertise. There could be. Right, they're still receiving that information,
but not if they're pulling out the SNP that only has to do with the ancestry part. Because, like he's saying, like in their database, they do the entire genome, but they're not necessarily giving that part out. They're only looking for the part to pull the profile of the ancestry genome part or SNP. Does that make sense? So they don't have the entire genome. They literally have
the ancestry part.
Well, they have, and I don't mean ancestry as in the website. I mean ancestry as in they're looking at people's ancestry. Yeah. Tara says, I think that Ann suspects the FBI used medical DNA too. Well, yeah, I don't know why she suspects that. That was all like in camera hearings with Judge John Judge. Okay, hold on 1 second. You guys can talk, but just give me 1 second.
No, that's okay. I'm just not sure if I understand it the same way. I think, I don't know if you can separate out the profile in such a way that they only receive the information about the genealogy, and that if they send it off to law enforcement, that if there's someone qualified, that they can't find out medical information from that. I'm not sure if I take that same thing away from it, because I just don't understand it. So maybe they can, because also Nye did say that if there's no privacy interest in putting your DNA up on one of these public databases. So if there's no privacy interest, then that therefore logically extends to not just your ancestry, but to just your DNA in general, doesn't it?
I would think, based on what they have mapped. One thing that's topical and recent is, they know the marker for breast cancer, to the point that women with that marker have such a high probability of developing breast cancer that they're having massive radical surgery as a preventative measure. I mean, all of that stuff, if you know what to look for. I don't know if, so one analogy might be Google Maps, and you set it to traffic, and it's green, yellow, or red. Those are all tracking individual cell phones. And that's how they get the traffic. That's how, it's not from a satellite looking at the traffic, it's from cell phone pings. But the program was set up way long time ago before Google paid a fortune for it. They were just leasing it.
Yeah.
But the program set up that there's no individual data. They can't go into that data and say, oh, Mr. Smith is on this road and he's in that green section or he's in that red section. It was set up specifically that way, and it's buried in your terms of service. I don't know if this data, the way it's collected or the way they would distribute it to law enforcement, I would assume that if they got something to law enforcement, they've whittled it down. They've narrowed it down to a small group, right? That's what law enforcement is trying to do, trying to narrow down a population of potential suspects to a more manageable number of probable suspects that they can dig into deeper. So there's going to be enough information, and depending on what the specifics are, what the reports are, they're going to potentially have these various markers, I would think. But the question is how much information they provide. Is it like Google and it's just a group with no real specific identifying information, or is it everything that you can possibly have? And I think that's determined by the people that are submitting, right? And that's what she's going into a little bit here. And the witnesses yesterday was kind of mentioning one database was law enforcement, one database was not law enforcement. That the fact that they mentioned or didn't mention that in the search warrant affidavit, significant. They were trying to hide the fact that they were using a non-law enforcement. So I don't know the answer, but those are just some thoughts off the top of my head. There are a lot of questions on that.
It outside of whether this is going to be relevant to Brian Koberger or not, I just feel like this is a important argument for rights in the US, like for your privacy rights in the US. And if there is no expectation of privacy when you upload your DNA to these sites, and so many people have done so already, that's extremely concerning. It's extremely concerning. So the state of Idaho said that there is no expectation of privacy. It's just like leaving your DNA out there on the street, just like putting your trash out, basically. And so if there's no expectation of privacy, and the court has agreed with them by not suppressing this, really, haven't they? So if that's the case, then that's a concern. And they haven't really limited what it can be used for. And no one understands what it is. No one understands what they're allowed to do with it, because it's a very complex issue, as you can see from what's been spoken about today. And no one reads the terms and conditions. Who reads the terms and conditions? Sorry, yeah, nearly 50% of Americans think it's fine
No one until
for
they're on
LE to
trial
use
for
ancestry
murder.
sites.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm
no
one
one
of them.
reads it.
Yep. You're one of them.
I'm one of the Americans that absolutely thinks that LE should use ancestry sites.
Sure, but I mean, what are the boundaries of that for you, T?
My boundaries of that, personally?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think you want to know, Hella. I think that they should stay within what the guidelines are for law enforcement to use. I mean, Ancestry.com, you can't upload raw data. So going back to like Golden State Killer time, they actually took the sample of DNA and uploaded it into sites and gave it a different name, like what we gave it, like Bill Nye, the science guy. And they put it in and said, hey, we're just looking for our I'm Bill Nye, and I want to be able to figure out who my family members are. Like, that's shady. I think that's shady, and I think that that should not be legally allowed. But for the purposes of, I mean, you have like GEDmatch has gone above and beyond to try to create an entirely separate website just for law enforcement. You just click the button. They took every single GEDmatch, everybody who was in the regular GEDmatch website became automatically opted out. And then they had to go opt in. So law enforcement should stay within the guidelines of using GEDmatch Pro, which is assigned to them, and not GEDmatch. I mean, I think that they need to follow the policies and procedures. But if you're asking like for privacy on, people who, put their information in here. So my brother is an anti-DNA person. He absolutely thinks that me believing in all of this is just bullshit. He thinks that it's terrible. He's more along the lines of like Sleuthy and Lana and you probably. For me,
I have no, don't think that I have an opinion in that regard.
Okay. So that's why I said probably. I didn't know. So for me, like I put my DNA in, and so if my brother goes and kills somebody, use my DNA to get him. Like, I don't care. Like, so like as a personal like part of it, I don't care. You can use my DNA to go catch whoever you want to catch. If they're out there committing, if they're raping, if they're committing child abuse, if they're murdering people, have at it. I'm good with it.
Yes.
So my brother's like, but I shouldn't be caught because you chose to give up your DNA. But here's the thing: is like you give up your DNA every time you walk out of your house.
That's
true.
And
I kind of caught the end of this, like what you guys were saying, because I had to step away for a minute. But that's really it. You're out there. It is. You're leaving it everywhere in the world. So as soon as I walk out the door and I go to Starbucks and I sit down and I have a drink and I throw it in the trash can.
Yeah.
My DNA is now where I sat. My DNA is on that table. My DNA is on that cup. I cannot control what Starbucks does with that, right?
No.
So now let's just say we want to go down the path that Ann Taylor's going down, and you guys kind of brought up right before I left.
Sure.
What if there is this law enforcement officer who does really know how to do that? Okay, well, what if there's this barista at Starbucks who knows how to swab because that's what they go to school for, and then they take it home, and then they genome my entire sequence, and they know my medical history. I mean, we can't just go out in the world and think that everybody that we come in contact with knows how to do all of these things.
That's true. That's an interesting argument.
I don't think it matters. I think at the point we are in life in 2025, if they want your DNA, they're going to get your DNA, whether I put mine into an ancestry site or not. So,
yeah, well, that makes sense.
I just have two quick last comments. So one issue that actually came up in the West Memphis 3 case was they did testing as part of a post-conviction testing as part of a post-conviction relief petition. And it's the shoelace they found in the ligature, the the hair they found in the ligature came back with enough material on it that they got a really good DNA profile. But the father of one of the victims, stepfather of one of the victims, wouldn't voluntarily provide DNA to the defense. So they sent out a couple of investigators, and they did the cup of coffee thing and cigarette butts, basically pulled them out of the trash to get a profile. And that's the profile that got submitted to the court, along with affidavits on how they obtained the profile. No one really balked at that. It's, you're out in the public. There's no expectation of privacy in your trash, no expectation of privacy in your discarded coffee cup or your discarded cigarette butts. And then, but here's an issue. Let me ask this question. So if you're really concerned about your medical privacy and people's access to it, and you were thinking about getting a genealogy thing run for entertainment, laughs, what if a provider, a startup, started up and said, look, unlike our competitors, we will absolutely never submit data to our database that identifies you in any way. We triple protect it, and it's anonymous from anonymous from anonymous. And if that's the kind of data protection you're interested in, then we're the company for you. And then they absolutely refuse to cooperate with law enforcement. Law enforcement subpoenas them. They said, well, we really can't help you. All of our DNA samples are submitted by code word, and then we keep our billing separate. There's no way to match DNA submitted to a credit card or debit card. We've set it up to be secure and anonymous. If that's a big deal, you'd think that companies would set it up that way. But, what are your thoughts on that? If, you're concerned about your medical privacy, you don't want people to know that you've got particular gene or marker that makes your offspring more susceptible to severe mental illness, for example, or your children, have a very high likelihood of developing breast cancer, or, a million other things that you may not want the world to know runs in your family. And then, the other last comment I have on it is, genetic counseling, which started in the 70s, and UC Davis in California is the leader in that, but it's for couples that have children that get born with, severe birth defects or don't survive a birth, massive defects. And so you started to go to genetic counseling to determine, is what happened genetic? And then they started offering it even before you started having children, that if there were risk factors, other people in your family had children with specific things, then they'd say you might want to consider genetic counseling. But so if
we do that with people with certain
genetic counseling and you submit
and they map your entire genome. Where does that data go? Is that a medical database? And then that data, because you sign all kinds of stuff when you do that. I saw all of those materials in a case I was involved with 30, 40 years ago, but that, this isn't going to go to anyone. It's super private, but we can share it anonymously with other research universities, other, research stuff, blah, blah, blah. But, so is some of that stuff now in the quote public domain, unquote, part of databases people submitted to genetic counseling 30, 40 years ago, and now their profiles, anonymous or not, are part of databases that law enforcement could get. So I'm not, totally against law enforcement being with a warrant, being able to obtain information. But, there's a lot of questions I have about it.
That's a
That's
good
it.
question about whether it goes into like a public database. Because like I know like some will offer genetic, well, more people will go to genetic counseling than will send out for genetic testing. But sometimes we will, and they use it, they base it off of tissue samples like that were taken sometimes even years prior, as long as the tissue sample is large enough, and they'll send it for like of a tumor, they'll send it for genetic testing, and then depending on that, they'll send you to a genetic counselor if there are particular things that like your children should know about, like whether you have children now or you're deciding to have children. Most of the people that I see already have children and grandchildren that now need to be tested for certain things because of genetic markers that they find in these tumors. But I don't know that would then go to like one of the public databases where you can find out if certain diseases run in your family, but maybe it does. I know we've never counseled anybody on it. Like I've never heard them say when they're signing consents, like this will now be in a large public database so that your other family members can like find you somehow.
And to see like what type of health issues you have to be on the lookout for.
Yeah, but I feel like like your distant cousins, grandmother's great grandfather, that side of the family that lives on the other end of the world, like I don't know that it would apply to them. So I don't know that I would want them digging into my medical stuff. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, that's what Kelt's saying. Like too, is like if these private companies like a 23andMe is selling off medical data, then insurance companies are going to stop giving people life insurance based on the markers that they have a potential health issue.
Like meaning, will it show up as like a pre-exist? Like, will you be? Yeah.
Decline life insurance. I mean, see that I draw the line at all that kind of stuff. That's where my line would be. My line would be at stuff like you can't be selling private information just because you're a private company without even allowing your users to know that that's what's happening.
And to be clear, we don't send them to like GEDmatch and like
right.
Like we send them to actual medical facilities that are testing the tissues.
But see, there's so many positives to it. But it has to be. You have to count on a human being a good person, and that's a struggle in the world. That they're
people
not
are fallible.
That they're not going to go outside their own policies and procedures. That they're not going to, do something, shady with the information that they do have.
Yeah.
Well, I'm of the belief that you can't expect privacy when it comes to specific things like that, but I do believe that you can. Get me on a panel, please. I've been saying that, baby Johnny Kramer. What'd Johnny say?
Interesting. Miss Arnhem was a laboratory test tube kid. Interesting interview with a vampire. Get on her panel, Miss Criminality, please. What the heck are you two talking about in here? They aren't good right now. All right, I'll ignore them.
See, this is exactly what I was saying before, right? Like the person who works for the cops, they could be not a good person, right?
Right.
Well,
I mean,
and on top of that, don't put me in a position like if I found out that someone in my family was uploading DNA and shit to random ass sites, and like I got a phone call or a visit by police over something that I don't want no parts of at all,
right. Like
and
this
they're
one
dragging
brother
me into
did.
something like that, I
Yeah,
don't want
that was
that. I
smart.
wouldn't do that.
Smart brother.
Because it wouldn't just be your brother. It could be, you know, your great uncle's, you know what I mean? It could be it could be a part of a family that you don't even know.
Mm-hmm.
Matt Hogg says, I'll be real. I don't know what's happening with this case or exactly what y'all are talking about, but I'm here
No.
for the chat.
We don't know either. But she said that Leah Larkin's thing was long, but we only have like
Yeah,
30 pages left. So I didn't read through it. I wonder if he cuts them off, like, because he's bored out of his gourd, like me.
See, that's so funny because you sound like it's like
Well,
your Bob, I'm Allie. This is fascinating to me. I love this stuff.
I want to know like particular things, but the droning on and the snips and the water balloons and the like, my ADD's like screaming at me. Like I kept losing my place on the page.
It's a chicken and an egg.
It's a
Yeah,
chicken.
chicken
It's
and
the
the egg.
chicken and the egg. Erin says we all look so different. She hasn't been here for a week and how we've all changed. So yeah, this is I don't know if you guys, if anybody knows me, knows like this is what I've always wanted to do. I absolutely love genealogy. I love forensic investigative genealogy. I think these forums that they're talking about, I belong to a lot of them. The ones that I can get into as a layperson and not as an actual registered forensic genealogist, but I belong to anyone that a layperson can belong to because I love this shit.
I think before they keep using this for things other than to like I said, I think it absolutely has a place like to identify remains of people that they don't know who it is, and those people are not like their families are not able to rest. They don't know, you know what I mean? Those things I do, but when it comes to this stuff, I just think that there's not enough rules or like oversight or even really this is how we all should be doing it. And so what happens is when people go off of that track, there's really no recourse for somebody to be like, you didn't do it right because this is how it's supposed to happen. And we're like, it's all kind of up in the air and we get to just kind of do whatever. Like if they uploaded a profile into a database that they were not given permission to do so, like as the person. So you got to think, they're not like uploading it to a law enforcement one where they're allowed to. They're uploading it like as a person saying, here's my DNA, tell me who my matches are. And they're not allowed to do that. And so
Right.
But what are the repercussions? There are none. There's
Well,
going to be none.
So what Othram did was put it into GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA, both sites that do allow law enforcement to utilize them.
But then the FBI came in and took the profiles and stuff. They didn't take the trees. The trees weren't built. They didn't build the trees. They told them to stop once they created the SNPs.
Yeah, and then they took it back and created their own SNPs.
And created the what?
They created their own SNPs because theirs are bigger than the other ones.
Right, the FBI did. And then they created, with those bigger SNPs, the trees that nobody can, like, give them. Like, my question, my number one question would simply just be, why did they take it back? Why didn't they leave it with the people whose job that is to build them? They created the SNP. What was wrong with their SNP? Why couldn't they use that SNP to just do the trees like they do?
Well, the
were hired.
The problem is we don't have an FBI person on here coming in and saying what they did and what they didn't do.
And they won't.
The program that they use And what does he call it? He has like a whole like performative, whatever he called his program, like where they put the criteria in. The FBI may have a different criteria of what they need to be able to run it, so they had to create their own. We just don't know any of that because all the stuff that had to do with the IGG when it came to the FBI and what the FBI turned over was all done in camera, and we don't get to see it, we didn't get to hear it, nothing. So we don't actually know, we don't know all the reasons that they did what they did.
Well, from what I understand, the FBI is like not cooperating. Like,
Yeah, they ran away.
we don't.
They gave everything that they were gonna give to Bill, and
which
then
did
Bill,
not include any of their trees or notes or anything like that. Just the snip.
Some people, because that's part of
It was just a snip.
Yeah, it was just the snip. That's all they gave him.
No, it included part of the people because that's why he did it in camera, was because they had that whole discussion about whether like even Brian could know about who the people were because of retaliation and things like, and because of the privacy. So they did that whole in camera thing with Judge. But it was only based on what the FBI gave to Bill.
Mm-hmm.
Because remember, Judge was like, well, I can't force them to give us shit. Like, so whatever we got is what we got. But Bill had access to more information that he had turned over, and he was telling the judge, like, no, I don't think they should have this because it's not public info.
But we don't know what it actually was. Like,
Right.
we don't know when he finally went in camera if, like, it was even what he said it was. It could have just been his immediate family tree. You know what I mean?
Right.
Well, yeah, DB, it could have just been Brian's name. Yeah.
Yeah, it could have been that too. Or like I said, just like his immediate family, it could have been.
Yeah. Why are the FBI like a law unto themselves?
Because they're federal. They outrank a state. Federal's bigger than state.
Yeah, but I mean, if they're going to get brought into something that's not their case, right? So when they're brought in to help and assist, they'll open up like a case, like an assist case, but it's not their actual case. So they like the jurisdiction is not theirs. They'll just do whatever it is that you need them to do or whatever. And so I feel like in those situations, none of their stuff should belong to them. Like, I think that it should all be
they
considered
shouldn't.
your, you're the state of Idaho. It should be your investigation.
It should all be handed over. They worked on a state case. They should hand over everything to the state. Bullshit.
They typically do from the FBI lab, but when you're, which is different than what they're looking for in the Karen Reed case. Karen Reed case, they're trying to get FBI agents, and that's where you need the TUI letters. So the way it works on FBI lab people is state says, yeah, we're designating these people as an expert. And they might be, it's not going to be ARCA. It's going to be somebody who works for one of the FBI laboratories. And so they'll say, yeah, we want the chemist, or we want the DNA people. Okay, great. And, we want the materials. In those situations, the laboratory people can't say, oh, we're not going to turn this over, because the judge will say, well, I'm not going to let this person testify. But it's a completely different dynamic. The FBI lab gets a tremendous amount of money from Congress to help states and communities within states that just do not have the resources to do the testing and types of things that the FBI laboratory does. And so it's kind of a different thing. They're not able to shield the things under TUI that FBI agents are. Typically, you're able to get all of the raw data, everything that you would get from a state lab analyst, because now sometimes you have to have a hearing on it. Sometimes you have to indicate that, Judge, my expert needs this stuff to, in order to compare and evaluate the practices at the lab and say, okay, well, what's going on? And well, you know, they're saying they're not going to give it to me, Judge. So, well, tell them, you know, you're not going to have a witness if they don't give it to you because they're entitled to it. So that's typically how that goes.
All right, hold on. I'm trying to pick up what they're putting down here in chat, and I'm not sure I'm getting it. So the FBI never received the raw data. They received the data through the email, manipulated the SNP profile, or they added his DNA to a database so they could get a match. Well, I think I'm confused by that. So you think they manipulated his DNA and duplicated his DNA in order to submit it to a different database?
Well, we know they had to have duplicated it because it was like double.
But that's pretty much, I mean, that's how that, I mean, that's not uncommon when they're creating it. So I guess from my understanding,
but they were going off of the SNP. They weren't going off of his STR. Like,
well, so I think that's my what I'm trying to understand here is the sheath is taken to the Idaho lab. The Idaho lab is the one that swabs the sheath and creates the profile and the
STR profile.
Just the STR, not the SNP, right? Okay. And so so that sample then is brought with the second witness, I don't remember who he was, or one of the guys who drives it down to Courtroom and says, okay, here is the sample. They create their SNP for IgG. They run it through GEDmatch and through family tree DNA, which they're both allowed to use. And then they find 4 brothers that are a match through a database, through the Y database, which is just like a male database, male only. And they find the 4 brothers. They contact at least one of them. I don't remember if they contacted more. And then they ask him to upload it into one of these other databases. And he says no. So I guess then they just send over all the things that they did over to the FBI. But I guess I'm trying to...
No, they just gave the FBI the SNP that they created.
Okay, but here's my question is, they're the ones creating... That's what... Okay, so no, Idaho State made the raw data profile. It's literally in the transcript that you read. Okay, that's what I thought, but I don't know if I'm right. So but why are we assuming that the FBI didn't get the same profile from the Idaho State lab and recreate the entire thing on their own to their own semantics? Why are we assuming that they took the Courtroom one and doubled the Courtroom one? Why aren't we thinking that they got the exact same information?
Because previous to this transcript, so like we're just reading one thing, but I think people are forgetting we've had multiple hearings on DNA. On this stuff specifically, like the SNP and what happened to the SNPs, and are we going to get the IgG stuff? Like, there's been like 5 hearings on it and tons of filings.
I don't think there's any disagreement that it was skin.
Yeah, I don't know.
And STR, so you obviously know you can't make the tree and stuff with an STR profile. You have to have the SNP. Right?
Okay, so colleges are more... Oh, not some of them. I caught me a man... Okay. In the script, they email them to the FBI. Okay,
Correct,
is that not what I said?
Yeah, we know that.
I don't know. There seems to be like an issue with what's being said, but then nobody can tell me what part is incorrect that I said. in my summary. So I don't know. So I'm going to let that go, and we're going to continue on reading the transcript and see what
Yeah.
Leah Larkin, the actual forensic genetic
Yes.
genealogist, says.
Let's do that.
Okay.
So the four brothers' names was not emailed. It was, they called them on the phone and said, we have these four brothers' names and you should call the brothers. Then it says, have you turned over your work with the genetic genealogy, the help you were giving Othram? Have you turned that over to the prosecutor? I've not turned over physical copies of anything. I don't know exactly what was provided as part of the discovery. Certainly is in an email document from me to Othram, and as such, I would assume that that would have gone as part of the discovery. A lot of email communications. After December 10th, there were some email communications between the one I think was most interesting to me had the names redacted and it contained screenshots. Othram reported 2 main DNA matches. One of them shared 70.7 centimorgan. Oh, we're not even there yet. We didn't even get to that part yet. So I'm reading you things we haven't got to yet.
Okay. Well, let's read. She's the last witness anyway, so let's get her done.
Yeah. And Aaron Hack, you're absolutely right, I think.
Hold on, I have to find the page. It was like 140 something.
Be top of 141.
41. We're at the bottom of 141.
Thank you. Like, good afternoon, like stay there, go there.
Yeah, that's where we are.
All right, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Will you say your whole name?
Yes, my name is Leah Larkin, and it's spelled Leah, and the last name is Larkin.
What do you do for work?
I'm a genetic genealogist.
What kind of background and training do you have?
I have an undergraduate degree in biology from Swarthmore College in Pennsylvania, and I have a PhD in biology, specifically in the field of botany from the University of Texas at Austin.
And how long have you worked in genetic genealogy?
I started doing it as an amateur in, I believe, 2013, and I started taking professional clients in 2016.
And what does that mean, you take professional clients?
Most of my clients are people like an adoptee or someone with an unknown father who is trying to identify that particular relative. So I can use their direct-to-consumer genealogy DNA test, build family trees, and work to identify their biological family.
So your work happens after the SNP is produced?
Yes.
Do I understand that right?
Yes.
Do you know what whole genome sequencing is?
I do. I have not done it myself, but my training in biology, I understand what it is.
Based on your work in genealogy, are you aware of what kinds of things are contained in the whole genome sequencing file?
Right. As few of the earlier witnesses have said, the genome is basically the blueprint. It's the instruction manual for your body. So first of all, it makes you human, but it also can determine your hair color, your physical traits, your eye color, and there are a lot of genes that are going to be associated with other things, like whether you have propensity for Alzheimer's or your height, your weight. Basically, all of these traits that make us unique for the most part are coded in our genes, our DNA, in one or more genes.
Is there any aspect in your field where medical information can be known?
Yes, so the DNA tests that are used for genetic genealogy are called microarrays. So when you spit in a tube and send it off to one of those companies, they're going to do what's called a microarray. A microarray test was designed for biomedical research. They weren't designed for genealogy. Genealogy was like an afterthought. These are tests that were created specifically to target physical traits, health traits, and it just happens to be useful for genealogy as well. So even if I do a test and don't look at those traits, they're still in that data file.
When you get the work, do you have to make a choice as to what kind of databases you're going to do your research in?
Yeah, so if I'm taking a client who is, for example, an adoptee, I will have them tested Ancestry and 23andMe. So those are two companies where you actually have to send in a spit sample to get into their databases. They don't take data files from other sources. The most cost-effective way to do this for an adoptee is to test at those two companies and then take one of the data files you get from, say, Ancestry and upload it into the smaller databases. That way you don't have to pay for the whole new test. You don't have to wait to mail it off and have the lab run it and get the results back. You can normally get your results in a day or two after you do the upload. So for an adoptee, there aren't really restrictions on which databases you can use because they were all generally created for amateur genealogists.
We've talked a little bit today about databases that have restricted use.
Yes.
What does that mean?
So for forensic genetic genealogy, which is also sometimes called investigative genetic genealogy, and then there's the combination of FIGG, just because we can't decide that is restricted to two main databases. There's Family Tree DNA, which we call FTDNA for short, and then there's GEDmatch. And those are the only two databases of any significant size that allow FIGG searching. Ancestry forbids it, 23andMe forbids it, and MyHeritage forbids it. Just an FYI, MyHeritage, if law enforcement can actually get a warrant, they don't forbid it, but you can't hardly ever get a warrant, so you can go with that.
Does GEDmatch have two sides to it?
Yeah, actually both the GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA have a specific upload process for forensic kits, which we call these tests a kit. So if you're a normal, regular adoptee, you can upload through the main layperson portal. But if it's a forensic kit, it's supposed to go through a special upload process. At GEDmatch, they call that GEDmatch Pro. Family Tree DNA does not have a special name for it to my knowledge, but there is a special process you're supposed to go to. And those kits that are uploaded through the forensic portal are restricted in which other kits they can see. The idea is that if you don't want to participate in a forensic search, if you're a layperson and you don't want to participate, you can opt out. And so a kit that is uploaded through the forensic portal should not be able to see a layperson kit that is opted out.
Do you know why these databases have these different, I guess, abilities or rules?
Yeah, so I'm sure we're all familiar with the Golden State Killer case. At least we've heard about it. That was the first big criminal case that was solved using this type of genetic genealogy. There had previously been one doe, unknown remains that had been identified a few weeks earlier, but the Golden State Killer case is the one that got all the media attention. On the one hand, there were people who were really excited about the prospect of capturing violent criminals using this method. And at the flip side, there were a lot of genealogists who were really concerned that they might be drawn into criminal investigations without their knowledge or consent. And so the community split. There were a lot of Facebook groups. A lot of genetic genealogy is just done through Facebook groups. And some of these Facebook groups just basically forbid it. You can't talk about this at all because it was causing too much conflict within the community. I went to a conference shortly after the Golden State Killer case was announced, and I was a speaker. And they pulled all the speakers aside and said, don't talk about it at all. You're not even allowed to mention it at all. This is how contentious it is within the community. So the database is realizing that this was a problem. So Ancestry, 23andMe, MyHeritage, all very quickly changed their terms of service to say, no, you can't do this on our databases. GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA, over the course of the past few years, have kind of evolved these systems in response to public outcry about privacy and consent, and also in response to some breaches and some missteps on the part of the companies themselves, and on the part of some of the genetic genealogists. So they evolved these systems to allow the users to opt out if they don't want to participate. So the public, I'm sorry,
the public outcry, that was people that didn't want their profiles searched by law enforcement?
Right. Prior to this, there had been occasional discussions in the genealogy community with people saying, oh, the cops are going to get our data, and other people were like, no, they only use CODIS, so they're not going to use our databases. And it turns out they were. The Golden State Killer case was being investigated. I'm not sure exactly when it started. I think 2017, and he was arrested in April of 2018. So law enforcement or genealogists working on behalf of law enforcement were in fact using the databases without the knowledge or consent of the regular person genealogists who were in the databases.
So was it 2018 when the terms of service used and people's privacy rights were recognized?
So there's a whole series of changes to the terms of service. So I can't speak to precisely which dates and which databases and which changes. I recall that MyHeritage, within a few weeks of the Golden State Killer being arrested, changed their terms of service to explicitly say, not in our database.
All right, let's talk about this case. Were you brought on to help us in this case?
Yes, I was brought on to help you interpret and understand what was done in terms of the genetic genealogy for this case.
And what did you look at to do that?
Well, it's been a bit of a struggle getting all of the material I would like to look at. So I've seen basically photos of a giant kind of poster scroll of a family tree that I believe the FBI built in Ancestry.com. I've seen pictures of a whiteboard in which they sort of like hand wrote on the whiteboard a descendant tree. So basically looking at some ancestors and mapping out the descendant lines leading to certain DNA matches. So I've seen communications between, in some cases, I can see who the recipients are, in some I can't, but I've seen a lot of email communications about the case. Do you want me to go on?
No. In the course of your work to try to help us understand what happened here, did you learn that first Othram worked on the case and then the FBI took over?
Yes. So Othram, I believe they were contracted, based on the invoice I've seen, they were contracted to do the lab work. So to actually generate an SNP profile, upload it to GEDmatch Pro and Family Tree DNA, presumably through the approved portals, and then I believe they were contracted to do the genetic genealogy. But they were told to stop work, I believe, on December 10th. And I've seen the preliminary report they wrote.
All right. Have you had a chance to look at what happened after December 10th?
So after December 10th, there were some email communications between the one I think was most interesting to me, had the names redacted, and it contained screenshots. So just to backtrack a little bit, the Othram report reported 2 main DNA matches. One of them shared 70.7 centimorgans of DNA.
Oh, I'm sorry, 70.7?
70.7 centimorgans. Do you know how to spell that? It's CENTIMORGAN, a centimorgan. And we just abbreviate it to CM. The other one I think was 60, and Othram's report specifically said those are low matches. Othram figured out how those two people were related to one another. I believe they were third cousins to one another, and based on how much DNA they shared with the crime scene profile, they thought that the individual who contributed the crime scene profile was descended from the second great grandparent of those two matches, a man named Blank and his wife Blank, I believe were their names, and they were born in the Blank.
When Othram quit work, were they following a family tree that they could have led and come to Brian Koberger?
Yeah, so based on my initial review of what they did, the crime scene profile was most likely descended from blank and blank, or perhaps from one of their siblings. It's hard to tell with DNA because it's not all third cousins share exactly the same amount of DNA. Some share more, some share less. It's just kind of a statistics game you play. That couple had blank children, and so there conceivably could have been hundreds of descendants of this couple. I haven't seen the full tree. I've just seen they had blank children. Othram chose one of those children and had tracked down, I believe, grandchildren. And there were 4 brothers. They recommended testing one of those brothers to get more DNA to get a closer handle on where their crime scene profile might fit into the family.
So when Othram stops there and the FBI takes over, you told us you saw something from Ancestry.com. Would you have expected to see any other kind of file with that file?
So this was basically like a giant poster-sized printout of information from that family tree. A family tree, when you build one at Ancestry, it's stored in a specific kind of data format, or more precisely, you can download the file in a specific type of data format called the GEDCOM. And it's a universal file format for genealogy trees. So you could take a GEDCOM file and you could open it up in a standalone software on your laptop. You could upload it to different genealogy company. Like I have a GEDCOM file for every single client case that I do. When I'm finished with the adoptee case, I basically give my client the GEDCOM file so they have a record of all the work that I did. And I would have expected the FBI to have that as well, but they did not turn that over.
You didn't see one of those?
I did not see one of those, no.
Knowing that Othram finished their work on December 10th and then the FBI took over, and we've heard that by December 19th, 9 days later, they'd made an identification, is that significant to you?
Yeah.
Why?
Because Othram's matches were, as in their own words in their report, those matches were low. They were recommending testing these 4 brothers to get more information. If you went out and if you approached those men, and even if one of them said, yes, you can test my DNA, the testing itself would have taken some time. Getting a kit to a person, getting the spit, sending it into the lab, having it analyzed, and it wouldn't have led to the crime scene profile because it was the wrong family branch. Wait, how would she know that?
Because she traced the rest of the tree, I'm assuming, from the brothers down. And I'm taking this to mean that the 4 brothers, tracing them down doesn't lead to Brian Koberger.
Okay, so going from low matches to an ID, or at least a tip, whatever they're calling it, within 9 days, that right there told me they had gone into a database they were not supposed to be in.
Were there other ways that you were able to confirm your belief?
Yes.
What was that?
So one of them, in one of those email communications, I believe this is the one that had both the sender and the recipient redacted. There were screenshots from GEDmatch, and I believe it said, so there were screenshots. How do I put this in GEDmatch? GEDmatch has a very open system. So if you were in GEDmatch and I am in GEDmatch, and let's say we were cousins, I could go in and look at my kit and I would see you in my match list. But I could also go into your kit and see me in your match list. So GEDmatch is just a super open database in that way. Any kit in the system that is public, you can see their matches.
Mm-hmm.
The one exception, however, is that if there are forensic kits in the database and I am a layperson and I am looking at a layperson kit, I can't see the forensic kits. They are invisible to me. But there is an email communication that has a match list from the perspective of somebody who only used the initials SC. I have no idea what this person's real name is. In the database, they are called SC. This screenshot is taken from the perspective of SC. And there is a match to the forensic profile from SC's perspective. That tells me that the forensic profile was uploaded through the regular GEDmatch portal and not the GEDmatch Pro Forensic portal, because it should not have been visible to SC.
Mm-hmm.
And the email says, this one's ours. And the other thing is that GEDmatch will also tell you how many days a kit has been in their system. And for that kit, for the match to SC, it had been in the database for 1 day. But Courtroom had uploaded it. I'm not sure exactly when, but I would have to say 6 to 7 to 8 days prior. So it should not have said the kit was only 1 day old.
So based on that email and what you saw, it confirmed your belief that the FBI used a non-allowed.
Right. So that was one. There were several lines of evidence. That was one of them that stood out to me, merely on that they had uploaded through the layperson portal of GEDmatch so that they could see all the people that were opted out.
Yeah, that's what I was saying before about how
But
they
I'm still
uploaded it like it was their DNA, even though it wasn't.
right. But she's saying the screenshot is coming from SC, and SC is a match to this profile. Right? So the SC is not Brian Koberger's profile. It's another profile.
Yeah, SC is probably them. Like, probably they're like, so I'm a police officer and I'm like, I'm going to upload this crime scene profile or whatever up in here, but I'm going to do it as normal layperson SC and see what it connects me to. Because it's going to connect me to all the people that didn't want to be compared to forensic profiles.
Okay, I'm going to go back to this. I'm going to keep reading, but I'm going to go back to this because SC seems to be not the profile. It has to be another profile, and then that profile is taking pictures.
Yes, because
so who's SC?
Well, that's why they said the email. It said this one's ours. So let's say you upload let's say Courtroom puts in a forensic one. And me as a law enforcement officer, I'm going to put one in as a regular person and upload this as if it's my DNA, but it's not.
But what I'm saying is, so but you both put in the same profile.
Well, mine is like doubled.
So essentially what the whole theory here is then that they create this fake Brian Koberger profile because it's doubled. They put it in and get a match to the Othram one.
It gets a match to all the people that are not, because that wouldn't be like a legitimate match. And it wouldn't be Brian Koberger. It would be SC, whoever that is. But it would give you access to view more people in the tree, like view more people who have sent in their DNA because they've opted out.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I have to put Brian Koberger. I have to put the profile in from the sheath as a layman.
Yes.
So if SC is the layman version of
Profile
sheath data,
yes,
who does SC match to is my question.
The one that was uploaded. Well, I would assume the one that was uploaded by Othram, but I don't think that that's what they're saying. I'm taking it to mean that they uploaded it and it gave them a match list of other family members that would not have shown up on the forensic side.
Right, but I guess that's why I'm going to go back to it, because what the way she just said it, in my opinion, is that it matched, that SC matched to the sheath data. SC is not the sheath data. Okay, I'm just going to go back now because it's just going to piss me off. that I don't.
It says this screenshot is taken from the perspective of SC, and there's a match to the forensic profile from
Correct.
SC's perspective.
Correct. Which the forensic profile is
uploaded through the regular GEDmatch portal and not the GEDmatch Pro. So I think they're not even saying, so what they're saying is it shouldn't have even been visible to SC if it was entered through GEDmatch Pro like it was supposed to and like Othram would have done it. So what they're saying is that they took the sheath DNA and they uploaded it into regular GEDmatch as a regular person so that they could see all of the profiles.
I totally understand that. But if you're taking a screenshot from SC and it matches to your forensic profile, it's the same profile, is what I'm saying. So whose profile is SC? Whose profile did they use to upload and build this tree?
The sheath profile.
The sheath profile can't be SC, because SC is going to be the exact same profile that's in the forensic profile.
But it wouldn't necessarily, because it would be, well, what would it matter if it was exactly the same? Like, why would that matter?
Because she could tell that. She would know that, she would be able to say right now they took this profile, because under the matches in GEDmatch, it's going to tell you how this person might match you once you dig into it. So that she'd
and that's
see
what
that.
she's saying. It's showing all the matches. Like, it's saying, okay, here's all the matches, including the forensic matches.
Okay, so somebody says I'm looking at it wrong. Somebody else says I'm right.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Sounds about right, right? Yeah. I just feel like there has to be, SC is just the initials of the person who uploaded the SNP. I understand that, but what I'm saying is if they're uploading the same profile that's in the forensic one, it's going to come up and be the same person. No, but she has a screenshot of the match.
But wait, you should keep reading.
Okay, I'm gonna.
Are you in the middle of page 155?
I have no idea. I have no idea where I am. Let me go see.
I think you are.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, I am.
Okay, read that part. Read your answer here.
Okay. You're gonna need a diagram or you need a chart. Okay, I'm gonna make a chart. Okay, so right. So that was one. So based on the email, what you said, okay, right. So that was one. There were several lines of evidence. That was one of them that stood out to me merely on that they had uploaded through the layperson portal of GEDmatch so that they could see all the people that were opted out. There were a couple of other matches. One of them was actually 250 centimorgans, which is something we get excited about in genealogy. And one of them was, I think, was closer to 70 that were not in the Othram report. Okay, if Othram had seen the one who shared 250 centimorgans, that would have been in their report.
So keep in mind that
Right.
that Othram would have only been seeing the ones where people opted in to be able to share their profile with law enforcement. So this 250 centimorgans, the higher one, the higher match, was part of one of the matches where the people had opted out of it, or the layperson
Right.
side.
Right. So yeah, so they're getting matches in the database that they should not necessarily.
Shouldn't even know about, because if they were using only the law enforcement side,
Then they would have already
these
had
wouldn't
it.
show up.
They would have already had it.
And she's assuming that because she's saying that a genealogist would not ignore that high of a match.
No, they wouldn't. I agree. Okay, so like their genealogists are good, they know what they're doing. They would not have ignored a 250 centimorgan match, and based on those other two matches at that point, I was pretty sure they had gone into MyHeritage database.
While you were reviewing this information so you could learn and try to figure out what happened here, did you have any ability to call anybody from the FBI and say, hey, what's going on?
I don't know who did the genealogy work at the FBI.
Why is that?
It's not in the information that we received.
Is that the part that was redacted?
I don't know if it was redacted or if it was just never, or we just never got it. So there was that one email that had a redacted sender and a redacted recipient, presumably. Those were the people doing the genealogy work. But other than that, I have no idea who did the genealogy work at the FBI.
Are there any other ways you know the FBI went where they were not supposed to go?
There was one piece of information in the discovery material that I did review. I believe we asked them to turn over the match list, and they were like, oh, we can't turn over the whole match list because it was 20,000 people. And that actually right there was a big tip-off, because if they had only used GEDmatch Pro and only family tree DNA, I think at most they could have gotten it to be about 10,000.
That makes
So
sense.
that right there tipped me off that they were in a database they should not have been in, not have been able to be in.
During the course of our work to try to understand what happened here, did you assist us with reviewing documentation and teaching us what else should have been there that we needed to ask for?
What specifically?
Well, the databases they went in and the match list and...
Right. So we've talked about what you see in a match list. We've talked about the fact that you can download the match list at Family Tree DNA. There's just a click button to download it, and you'll get a CSV file, which you can open in a word processor, or you can open in a spreadsheet program. At GEDmatch, you can also get the whole list match, or the whole match list. So you would have gotten that. I tend to do that for my clients just so if I'm not online, I can still work through their materials, and I can report that back to them.
And did you testify in a motion to compel hearing to try to get this information so we could tell and confirm what you believed about the FBI going into a non-allowed database?
Yes.
And do you know if sometime after that we received confirmation that they did?
We did finally get a letter from the FBI in which, so we specifically asked to know which of the matches were in which of the databases, and they did not tell us that. But they did give us a list of the databases they had uploaded to, and it included Family Tree DNA, GEDmatch Pro. Those are the two databases they're allowed to use. But it also listed GEDmatch. It also listed GEDmatch, not GEDmatch Pro, but just GEDmatch. They're not allowed to go into the regular GEDmatch portal. And then finally, they admitted they had uploaded to MyHeritage.
Your Honor, I'm at D26 and I can pass this copy to the court. I would ask that it be shown to the witness first.
Judge.
He hates me.
Yeah, he doesn't really like you very much. He doesn't even want to answer you at this point.
He's pissed about this exhibit.
Yeah.
I'll be the judge.
What's the red number on it?
Your Honor, the red number is 999.
Notice of in-camera submission.
Yes.
All right, go ahead.
Dr. Larkin, will you thumb through that? It's towards the back page.
Okay.
Do you recognize that?
Yes, the second to the last page, it says, below are the genealogy services utilized by the FBI.
And what does it tell you?
It says Family Tree DNA, GEDmatch Pro, GEDmatch, and MyHeritage.
Thank you. Would Your Honor like the copy they have there?
Your Honor? I think it's part of the record you submitted, so I have a copy.
Okay, thank you. Give me just a minute to check with my team. I do have another question. What is Prometheus?
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 I don't know.
Prometheus? Is a third-party site, so it's not part of Ancestry, not part of MyHeritage. Actually, MyHeritage owns it now. It's the site where you can take the S&P profile that you get from any of the companies and upload it to the site. And it will basically look for medically informative S&Ps in your profile, and will do reports on them. I think it's like, I don't know, it's like a nominal fee, like $12 or something. And it would do a report of all the S&Ps that you have in your profile.
If you had my SNP, you could do that and find out?
Yes, I can do it on, if somebody has done a genealogy test for $12, I can put it in the Prometheus system and get trait reports and health reports.
And how extensive is that information you could get?
It's pretty comprehensive. I mean, you will get reams and reams of reports. I should say that how do I put this? There are a lot of traits that are controlled by multiple genes. And so if a trait is controlled by multiple genes, I can't say for certain, yes, you're going to go Alzheimer's. No, you're not going to get Alzheimer's. It's more of a risk factor, but you can look at the multiple reports and see if they're, for example, giving you an increased risk of Alzheimer's or whatever other traits are in the system. If you have an increased risk of breast cancer, prostate cancer, or anything else out of there.
For $12?
Yes.
Thank you. That's all my questions. Hold on a minute. The prosecutor may have one for you.
Oh, yes. Good afternoon, Dr. Larkin.
Good afternoon.
So, you testified that when people come to you wanting to do genealogy tests, you recommend Ancestry DNA and 23andMe. Is that correct?
Yes.
And one of the reasons you recommend those two is because they have the most users in the database. Is that correct?
Yes.
And one of the reasons you recommend... Sorry. And one of the reasons why that's important is because when you're looking for Ancestry, really the best database for you is the one that has your closest relatives in it, right?
Why do I feel like Jennings is back?
No, she talks really slowly.
Yes.
She's here somewhere, but I think she's asleep. What did you just suggest? Okay, but you can't know that until you use the database. So you just use the one with the most users.
There are two reasons to start with those two companies. One is because they have the largest two databases, and then because you cannot upload into those databases. You have to test with them. You can test at Ancestry and then get into the MyHeritage and Family Tree DNA and GEDmatch databases for trivial amounts of money. Whereas if you test it at Family Tree DNA first, the only way you're going to get into Ancestry database is by doing another test. So I just always recommend starting with the biggest, and then if you want more databases, you can upload into the smaller ones.
And one of the reasons you might want more databases is so if you get more matches, right?
Yes.
You can gather more information that way.
Uh-huh.
And typically, that's why people are coming and asking you about these databases, is because they want more information about their family. Correct?
People generally come to me because they need help interpreting the matches that they have.
I want to talk a little bit about the number of users in these databases. So, we've been discussing the ones that were on that list you read from the document the FBI indicated they used in this case. Do you remember that list? On that list, do you know which of those databases has the fewest number of users? You have a timer.
Where did you go? Where are you?
Sorry, I just added that bit.
Oh, I was like,
So-
where the hell am I? Okay, the fewest number of users. I believe Family Tree DNA is currently about 1.8 million. It's not an exact number, but I think that's probably about where they are right now. A GEDmatch is, I think, a little over 2 million, and MyHeritage recently announced that they were at 9 million.
And when you say 1.8 million, you mean 1.8 million other people that have utilized their services and that you potentially could match with if you utilize that service.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
I have a couple of questions for you on this Prometheus. You mentioned it costs money. $12, I believe you said.
I think it's $12.
Why would someone utilize Prometheus instead of just reading their SNP profile themselves?
The S&P profile is basically just a list of, there's a location code, but it's going to be something like RS23744, and you're not going to know what RS, I don't even know what number I just made that number up. You're not going to know what that S&P is. You're not going to know what gene it's a part of. You're not going to know whether an A or a T is good or bad. Prometheus takes your data file and references published literature on what those S&Ps might impact in terms of traits, and then produces a report from that.
So even you, for example, if you wanted to know your medical information and you had your own SNP profile, you wouldn't just attempt to read it. You would use a service like Prometheus.
Yes.
No further questions.
Thank you. Redirect.
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank God. Thank you, Doctor. You can step down. Is that the state's last witness on this issue?
Defense? Yes, Your Honor.
Pardon me, defense. I'm used to the state going first on things. I apologize. Does the state have witnesses?
Your Honor, no, we're not going to call Dr. Mittelman.
I'm trying to recall what I said about argument on this case, whether I said we could do this publicly or not. I want the parties' input on that as we make that decision, whether we can argue the Franks and suppression issue on IgG publicly. I know your position is we should, but in light of my ruling, can you?
Your Honor, I'm going to refer to what the FBI did in here. I'm going to refer to the Department of Justice interim policy. I could probably not name the 4 brothers that the state lab tested.
Wait, what?
Wait, what?
I can probably not name the 4 brothers that the state lab tested?
Oh, they did.
Yeah, and then he says, can we avoid talking about the fact of the 4 brothers, meaning that they're even there, that they even exist?
When did the state lab go testing these 4 brothers?
Oh, I don't know. God damn.
Okay.
They called the one and he said, no, thank you.
He said,
Did they go take your trash?
Oh, maybe that's maybe that's the one they had to surreptitiously take, maybe. The cigarette butt, maybe. I'm just guessing.
That's why I think they used that profile and put it in as SC. So they tested. I can probably not name the 4 brothers that the state lab tested. Okay.
Okay, we could. You want me to go on or? Okay. Can we avoid talking about the fact of the four brothers? I understand that there's, but I'm not gathering the import of it on the issues at hand. I think you could reference that there was some information that was itself insufficient to generate a profile, and I know what you're talking about.
I'm trying to think of how I could do it. I want to make sure I've made a really good record here. The record is very important.
Scroll down. Of course.
I think I can talk about Othram's recommendations that were attempted to be followed, but nothing worked. I think I could do that. Maybe after hearing the evidence, if there's a ground the court really wants me to stay away from, other than saying the four brothers, maybe that would be helpful to know. I'll do my best, Your Honor, but I really want to make a good record for Mr. Koberger.
Counsel?
Your Honor, I think we could probably do the argument publicly. I don't need to reference the brothers. I don't need to reference any of the specific names. As I explained earlier, and as the court has seen, we didn't put on evidence one way or the other as to whether the policy was followed, for example. So that part of the argument is even assuming, from our perspective, I think we could probably do the argument publicly.
I thought I made it clear what I've tried to do is open up evidence, whether for the state or against the state in this case, that potentially is not coming into trial that could influence potential jurors. This is, as a side note, that's a very interesting point there. I didn't hear a lot of that today. I think the fact that there was investigative genealogy done in this case is not necessarily a secret, given that we publicly talked about that we're going to talk about that. That we publicly talked about that we were going to talk about that. Okay. I think
Good job,
the
Judge
more
Kemper.
specific things, the more specific things about what happened within that, it's best if we kind of refer to that more generally in terms of like the four brothers and whatnot. I think, frankly, it's appropriate to discuss how law enforcement handled the profiles that they received. I think it's appropriate to talk about whether or not those profiles, what privacy is at issue in those profiles. I think that obviously the state is going to talk about standing and other issues and your client's specific privacy rights with respect to this. So I think that's appropriate. So I think we're generally okay staying away from some of the specifics that I'm not sure that ultimately would be admissible at trial. Even if I were to say, well, admissible at trial, the whole IgG issue, I'm not sure that's going to be admissible at trial. I suspect the search, the trash pull, is going to be admissible at trial, and that genealogic match, allegedly, to Mr. Kohlberger's father, as I understand it, and the lack of attempt to figure out, I think, what I'm understanding, at least from the testimony, the attempt to figure out the mixed profile. So I think that's all fine. The preference is staying away from the specifics as to what those genealogy searches showed, more specifically that we talked about, the brothers and the names of individuals who were testified to, if that makes sense.
It does. We had an affidavit attached to the back, I think, of our reply briefing on the suppression issue. I want to make sure the court looks at that. That's admitted as evidence, and I probably don't want to refer to that publicly. Would you like my copy?
What was the date of filing?
It should have been the 19th, December 19th.
What was the name of the document? Reply to, objection to?
This was the reply to the state's objection to the motion to suppress IgG material.
It's not showing on the 19th. Oh, here we go. It was on the 20th. What is it you want to reference in the argument with respect to this affidavit?
Standing, Your Honor. I don't need to reference that particularly. I just wanted to draw the court's attention to it.
In particular, the standing that the affidavit suggests that the unknown E was Mr. Kohlberger. Is that what I'm reading?
No, that there was a sample within the trash that was Mr. Kohlberger's.
Okay, I'm not sure the state's arguing that there's no standing as to the trash. I think the standing argument related to the genetic testing through the companies and to the objection to the testing of materials found in the crime scene. Am I incorrect about that, Mr. Nye?
Your Honor, we did assert in our briefing standing, it was kind of in passing in the sense that we think the fact that it was a trash pull resolves that issue.
I appreciate the trash pull legal issues in terms of privacy standing, but in terms of standing of this is not Mr. Kohlberger's DNA, so why am I briefing or why am I hearing from him standing, which is part of what you argued on the IgG information?
Correct.
There's that issue. I don't see that impacted here because it sounds like some of this DNA was in the trash. And then there's the standing issue, as I understand it, related to the extent that the defense is not conceding that the DNA found on the knife sheath was Mr. Kohlberger. He has no position to object to the testing of the DNA and the knife sheath.
Well said, Your Honor, and correct.
I don't see there, frankly, is an argument as to the standing of, quote, not his DNA, quote, as it relates to the trash pull. That's just how I see it. If you think that's different and you need to make that argument, you need to let me know so I know, what we're getting into.
No, Your Honor, it's not different than that. What happened is in the opening brief, they asserted there was DNA found in there, including an unidentified male. In the response, I said, well, that's not standing. You can't just say unidentified male. In the reply, they attached this saying, well, we looked at it and it was his. And I'm pointing. His. That's sufficient. I don't plan on arguing that point.
All right. Are we all square then?
I think so.
If you have a question of doubt, ask to approach and we can offline real quick. I would rather err on the side of being cautious than not.
May I have 5 minutes?
Oh, no, we're going to take more than that because I need the public to be notified. So we're going to take at least 15, 20 minutes.
Your Honor, can I just briefly ask, we have some of the victims in the hallway. I guess they've been told by somebody they can come in when the hearing was open.
I'm not sure who would have told them that.
I don't know either. That's just what they're representing to us. We didn't understand that to be the courts.
The problem is I don't want to have to chase them out.
Absolutely. Understood completely.
Sandra, can you have a TV in the conference room they could watch it on? That's fine.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor.
And then my understanding is we can then go into the next evidentiary phase without a problem, and it can be public, correct?
Yes, from my perspective, Your Honor.
Your Honor, I think our team might be a little bit confused about that. I think we thought that Frank's might be next, but...
No, after the Franks.
Okay, so I'll do the suppression IgG and then...
we'll do the argument on that, unless you want to just go straight into the evidence and come back to the argument on the Frank's IGG.
Okay.
And do it together with the suppression stuff.
No, I planned to do that when I did all the Franks, to address the entire Franks. I think I'm confused about when the court wanted me to do that. If you want to take more evidence today, if we're going to argue IGG and be done, and then if the court wants to finish with evidence today, and then I will do Franks tomorrow, argument, the proper argument.
Side note before my thing, there still this confusion on when to argue and what issues are part of what argument continue to persist. So my preference is, because I don't want to get into the evidentiary phase of Franks other than the issue of IGG, is to argue your Franks motion next, including the IGG and your proffer for the other Franks issues, and then we can go into evidence on the suppression issues. Does that make sense?
That does make sense, and that's perfectly fine. I might need a minute to pull that box out after we're done with this argument, if that's okay.
Sure. You can always have a minute when you need it.
Your Honor, I'm sorry to complicate things, but just to be clear, so over here we've split that. Ms. Jennings is handling the Franks, and I'm handling the direct IGG suppression. Is that okay if we split it that way?
Sure.
Thank you.
Again, my thought was we do all of the Franks, including the IGG stuff, next, because I don't want to take evidence that is then going to be said as part Franks, because if the state's then asserting it, I think I've cracked the egg, or whether or not I could decide the issue prior to a Franks hearing. So that's why I want to have it wrapped up before I take more evidence. Okay?
Sounds good.
All right. We'll take about 20 minutes to get the public here notice. And meantime, Sandra, you got that Dr. Pepper for me I needed?
You know what's funny? The public had already been waiting an extra 40 minutes. He didn't need to stop for any longer.
And also, once they did start, like the actual public part, I think they all seemed still confused.
They were all still confused.
Be right back.
T, I have to go.
Well, I've got a question.
Okay, Hella, thank you so much.
Thank you, love.
Hella.
I'm sorry I have to run. I have to teach a class.
Yeah, no, you're good. Thank you. I appreciate you so much.
Bye, guys.
So
Thanks,
is
Hella.
the coverage in this court? Bye-bye.
Yeah. So when they started the public
audio
hearings,
in this new courtroom, with
what is it?
is it as good as the prior one?
The audio and stuff.
audio.
Personally, I think the audio and video is way better. Like when I heard
Okay.
them in this new courtroom for the first time, I was like, "Oh my God! Like I can hear. I could not hear before."
Yeah, and the camera angles were a little messed up. There was like one camera like pointed at the defense, and you could see them fairly well. But at times there was one attorney was kind of off camera, and then the judge would be like sitting at a desk somewhere else. It almost looked like at times some of those hearings, but
Is he cutting out for anybody
those
else?
hearings
It's
and
me too,
videos
but
are
I thought
pretty
it-
easy to find.
I thought it was
Travis,
my
I think
internet.
you're cutting out a little bit. Yeah, I can't hear you.
What have I done? I'm sitting here unzipping a thing that's got over 9,000 files in it. I don't know what I was thinking.
Oh, that's going to take you forever.
Yeah, like I could go to bed and then maybe this will be done in the morning.
Well, I know. So Travis, before we started the live, Travis and I were talking about like, is this a Frank's hearing? Is this not a Frank's hearing? Like, what is going on? Why is this so confusing about this Frank's? Like, it's the weirdest shit.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but then he does end up saying this was a Frank's hearing in his order, which Travis pointed out, where he says the court permitted a full Frank's hearing on the motion only insofar as it pertained to the alleged omission of information regarding defendant's identification through IgG.
Yeah.
So that it was a Frank's hearing. But then Travis pointed out that at the end of this, that last page, he says, so based on the foregoing, the defendant's motion for a Frank's hearing is denied. So it's like so is it denied for the rest of the Frank's stuff? I mean, I can understand, like, this is, I don't know how Ann Taylor wasn't like, I need some actual clarification on what the fuck is happening right now, because this doesn't make sense. Are we in a Frank's or are we not in a Frank's? And if we're in a Frank's, am I not allowed to bring up all the shit that we're having to do with the Frank's?
You're asking the wrong one.
Right.
It seemed like
we were why she's confused.
It's funny because like she would be like, I'm confused, right? And then he would like give an explanation and she'd be like, okay, that makes sense. And I'm thinking, bitch, you know that don't make any fucking sense. Just say. It's like when you ask someone to repeat themselves like 3 times and you still don't know what the fuck they're saying, so you're just like, oh, okay, yeah, like, and then you move on. Like, that's what it's like.
Well, that's why it's funny, because it's like, are you splitting up all this stuff about the Franks, and then at the end of that transcript, he's like, all right, so now let's go into the Franks.
Oh, okay.
What have we been doing then?
The Franks. The pre-Franks.
So I was like, so do they have a hearing to determine whether they should have a Franks?
Yeah,
Because
basically.
but like that's what this seems like to me. But that's not a legit hearing.
It was a hearing to hear if we should have a hearing on the Franks, which
It's like
he obviously decided not to.
Chelsea, that's perfect. It's like a Frankie Jr. Totally get it. No, because they already had the offer of proof. I don't know. Here's Travis is back again. Let's see if he can connect this time. Yeah, that's the official term. It's a Frankie Jr. Travis, you back?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we're talking about the Franks, not the Franks, and whether this was a Franks or a Frankie Jr.
Great.
Do you want to add anything to that?
Sorry.
We still don't know what's happening.
I didn't know where you were on it, but it's.
I told them about the page 2 and page 38.
On page 38. So they denied they said we're denying you a Franks hearing after all of this stuff about Franks. So it was very, very confusing. But on the top of page 2, they kind of talk about that in the interest of efficiency, I'm going to hear, I heard evidence of witnesses to kind of figure out where things would be. And then he goes, I haven't gone through much after that, but he goes step by step, apparently, through a myriad of issues, and then ends up on the last page or second to last page under the conclusion saying, I'm denying you a hearing under Franks. Very, very odd. Never seen that. Typically, those that followed Delphi, you saw that They laid out the things that they thought entitled them to a Franks hearing, and the court summarily denied it. And then they filed Franks 2, some additional information that said, hey, we're entitled to Franks, and then maybe even a third or more. But it's where it's reversible error, and where a trial court has to be most concerned with is if a defendant lays out enough information, lays out enough of a background where they're entitled to a hearing and it's been denied, that's reversible error. They got to send it back. So normally courts will err on the side of caution and allow at least some hearing on it. But here, it's outright denied it after hearing partially. A lot of judges would have just said, I granted the hearing conditionally, took all of the evidence. Even though I don't think they would have been entitled to a hearing per se, I went ahead and allowed the hearing, and I'm still denying it anyway. But it's not how these things normally go.
So, final answer, Travis, was that a Franks hearing, or was that not a Franks hearing? Or is it a Franks hearing?
Not a Franks hearing in the eyes of the law. It's not a Franks hearing. It was a hearing to determine whether there would be, there's just so much confusion about this testimony was going to apply to multiple issues. But based on that last sentence, in terms of an appeal, they were denied a Franks hearing.
Okay. It was a hearing on evidence for a Franks. But he calls it a Franks, Tara. I just want to make that very clear. Judge Hippler called it a Franks. That's what he says. In the interest of evidentiary efficiency, the court permitted a full Franks hearing on the motion.
Yeah.
So, I just put it out there.
So, yeah. So, I don't. Well, we saw a few different examples, like, he cracked an egg, and then there was that one thing I had to read 2 or 3 times about just his phraseology on some things, difficult to follow. And everybody would say they were on the same page as him. Okay, we're going to do this with this, and we're not going to get into this with that person, but yet there's still confusion or uncertainty on behalf of the 2 lawyers on how things are going to be argued. I think the state kind of figured it out at the end and then said, oh, we divided this up a certain way. I better let the court know that's how we divided it up. Is that going to be okay? Meaning that Nye handled all of these witnesses, as far as I can recall, handled all of those witnesses, but his other attorney or attorneys working with him were prepared to argue certain things that were not covered. And so he wanted to be sure, hey, we split this up a certain way, and even though they didn't handle any of these witnesses, they may be involved in the argument that we're getting ready to start in 15 or 20 minutes. Interesting that, so this whole thing was sealed and nobody was in the courtroom, and That's really quite interesting that they did that. And we think that's like to protect these four brothers' names and or more than that.
All the IGG stuff has really almost been argued when it comes to anybody's info and like the FBI's info, Othrum's info. It's almost always been done kind of behind closed doors. So I don't know if it's because of the names or what. But once that, after that very first initial one, they started doing everything in camera or in closed hearing. Okay, so I went back and was reading this again, and I'm going to try to explain my perspective on it because after rereading it, I still believe what I think is correct. And so somebody who doesn't agree with me is going to have to maybe come up here and tell me why you don't agree with me. Because I don't know how else to read this. So I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna explain my thought process, and then, like I said, if you don't agree with me, I'll drop a link. You guys can come up here and tell me why you don't agree with me. So she says there is an email communication that has a match list. Okay, so the email communication that has a match list is from the perspective of somebody who is SC. So this profile in there that they have this information from is from the SC account. This screenshot is taken from SC's perspective, and there is a match from SC's perspective to a forensic profile from SC's perspective. Forensic profile would be the Koberger profile. So she says that tells me that the forensic profile was uploaded through the regular GEDmatch portal and not the GEDmatch Pro, because the forensic profile should not be visible to SC's profile. So they've used the profile. The forensic profile is BK's. It's the one from the sheath. Well, I'm just going to say BK. Some people might say it's not BK's, but I'm going to say it's BK's. Forensic profile, BK's profile. SC's profile, not BK's profile. It matches BK's profile. And yes, it still means that BK's profile is put into the system the wrong way because SC should not be able to see it. They say this one's ours. So that very well could be that the SC profile is matching the one that is theirs, BK's profile. Make sense? So the match to SC, it had been in the database for 1 day. So the match to SC is BK's profile. Matches to SC, it had been in the database for 1 day. So they did, in fact, put BK's profile in to regular GEDmatch, which they're not supposed to do, even though Othram had already uploaded it to GEDmatch Pro 6, 7, 8 days prior. So SC and BK profile are not the same profile, and SC is not BK's profile. SC is somebody else, and that is where I'm very curious, because what it seems to me is they took these 4 brothers, or one of the 4 brothers, and put it into GEDmatch, put the forensic profile into GEDmatch, and built a family tree. You guys understand what I'm saying? SC is not BK. They put in 2 separate profiles. That's how they're able to get screenshots from SC's perspective. So whoever SC is not BK. Now, I hope I broke that down enough where it makes sense. Does anybody disagree with me?
I think SC is somebody in law enforcement.
You think SC is somebody in law enforcement, but how would SC? Okay, so let's just say I'm Teresa. I'm in the FBI. Why would I put my profile in and name it SC? And how would my profile get a match to BK? I'm
Because
related
it was the profile I was given. It's
from
not
who?
my physical profile.
No,
Like
I agree with you there. Yes, SC is definitely law enforcement, but whose profile is it? I think is what I'm saying.
I
Who
think it's
who is SC's profile?
I think it's a profile of the sheath DNA.
It can't be because SC matches the sheath DNA. This forensic profile right here, which I'll just call it FP. So FP is a match to SC. FP is the sheath profile.
So then why couldn't it be the same?
Because it would show up that it's the same DNA. It wouldn't show up as a match. It would show up that that's me.
So, but what if it was duplicated multiple times?
Doesn't matter. Once you're getting into the match stage of it, it wouldn't matter. It's still going to be me. It's going to match me. If I am both, if I put in the same SNP profile as the FP profile and the SC profile, it's just going to be the same profile. It's going to ring that it's the same person.
But if
no matter how many times you double it.
Okay. But what if you're dealing with not a full unknown? So FP is the sheath DNA, and let's say it wasn't a full profile.
Correct.
Okay. Then when you go to upload SC and you've fucked with the profile to make it a little bit more than what it already is, how would it not show you as a match, like as a potential match rather than an exact match?
I have a way to show. I'm going to show you this because everything is based off of centimorgans. So you're thinking, I know exactly what you're thinking now. I'm understanding. You're thinking of the actual coded profile. Let me show you this. So once everything is uploaded, your coded profile no longer matters. I'll show you like how, as a genealogist, like what we would use, like a centimorgan chart, because everything is converted to centimorgans once you're in the matches. Let me find a good one. This is, I think, one that I've typically used. So we try to bring this over here so I can show you. So if I put my DNA in, even if you go double my DNA or do whatever you did to make my SNP profile, if you put it in, this is still me. It's going to show up that it's me.
But you would be putting in like your spit in the tube, so they're coming up with a full profile that is you.
Correct.
Rather than like a manufactured profile from the little bit of skin cells that they have.
You'd have to manufacture a different profile then. Your profile is still going to be your profile no matter how much bigger they made it. Okay, so Sony's agreeing with you. Based on the file size and the centimorgans, the Othram and the FBI were two different profiles. Not on the centimorgans, in my opinion. So I'd be curious why you think that part.
So then why is the FBI with this SC profile that they doubled in size, why is it getting a match of 250 that Othram didn't get with half the profile?
Oh, because this is okay. So Othram creates the profile, right? They put it into GEDmatch Pro, and the highest relation that is in GEDmatch Pro, that meaning some lay person who said yes, LE can use my stuff. That the highest match that they got in Othram was 70 centimorgans. So we know that the FBI takes that SNP profile of FP, right? The forensic profile. They stick it into regular GEDmatch, and now it's got a match to somebody of a 250 centimorgans.
But what if that 250 match is the profile from Othram?
It isn't, because the Othram profile, if you're putting in the exact same one, this is what I'm trying to tell you. Let me go back to my chart.
But how is it not the same? You're saying it's the exact same one. How is it the exact same one if one is like double the size? How do we know that through their replications and duplications and whatever else, that it's still actually the same profile?
Because
Like,
they have his profile already from the FB or from the Idaho State Lab and Othram.
well, they had his,
Same profile.
they have the sheath profile. They don't have like his profile. They don't have his DNA sample.
FP profile. That's why we'll go with the forensic profile, FP profile. They all have that now. So even if they go in and they have to, if they go back to the basics and duplicate it again, it's still based off of the same core DNA.
This is what I'm saying. This right here is what I'm saying. How do we know that what the email wasn't, here's a screenshot of what our profile is, so that you don't get them mixed up when you're seeing these two matches? One is Othram and one is us. SC is us, is the one we put in.
I disagree. I don't
Because
think
if they do it that way,
no,
Othram won't be able to.
There's two FP profiles. She tells you that. She tells you there's two FP profiles. One is put in 7 to 8 days prior, and the other one is put in
Othram.
1 day prior. That 7 to 8 days is Othram.
Mm-hmm.
One is put in 1 day prior. The one that is put in
SC.
1 day prior is matched to SC from SC's perspective, which means that whatever DNA is in there from SC, the FBI can see it because they're taking the screenshots matching to FP.
But SC in the regular portal shouldn't be able to see the forensic profile. Or is it the other way around?
Say it again. Sorry, I was reading Tara's comment. Say it again.
So SC,
Mm-hmm.
it says there, scroll up just a tiny bit, like one line or two. Okay, so this screenshot is taken from the, okay, so the email is a match list for person SC. So
Correct.
it's GEDmatch sending SC an email saying, here's the 10,000, 20,000 matches that you have.
Correct.
On that list of matches, 20,000 matches.
Correct.
One of them is the forensic profile.
Correct.
So the forensic profile. Oh, so SC. So you're saying SC could be me saying, hey, I got this showed up
Correct.
on my. So as an example, as a hypothetical, I am Koberger's sister.
Yes.
And I call the police and I say, I'll submit my DNA and see if
Yeah.
your forensic profile comes up as a match.
Correct.
The FBI still would have had to have put the forensic profile in themselves in the regular GEDmatch for her to
if
see it at all.
if they sent their so like I don't take it so I wouldn't say sister because at that time nobody knows about BK, right? So an FP profile doesn't have a sister. We don't know who the sister is because we don't know who it is. But so what I'm thinking is they took, and this is all just my thought process. Let's say Othram found these 4 brothers that we know are somehow related, but we don't know exactly how they're related, and we need to be able to figure that out, but they won't test. So we go get one of them's cigarette butt, we send it to the Idaho State Police lab, they take out that DNA, they create the SNP profile, and I stick
But they
it
don't.
in.
They don't create the SNP. The whole reason they had to send it, they had to send what they created for the sheath profile.
Okay. All right, well, maybe we won't go Idaho State. They create the IgG profile. Let's just okay. So it goes to the FBI, whoever.
That's what I'm saying.
Whatever
They would have had to send it somewhere. Like one would just assume they would keep using Othram.
Well, they don't want to use Authrum because Authrum has their own policies and procedures that they're not going to go outside of. So they created the profile, they ran it into the two databases, came up with a 70 centimorgan match, which is nil to nothing. It's going to be much harder for them to build a tree. So if FBI is like, okay, well, don't worry about building the tree, send it back to us, and we'll take care of it. So they take the SNC.
So why do they mess with it though? Why do they double it? Why not just put it in, if you're going to put it into GEDmatch, regular GEDmatch, and that's your plan, why not just put what you have in regular GEDmatch? Why is there?
I think that's where they're coming in saying why is it so much bigger, and did you make it bigger to use it in these medical programs because you needed more info? I think that's where the medical stuff's coming in. But just for the purposes of this, I think that they take somebody else,
An actual person,
right?
And they say spit in this tube and send it to GEDmatch.
Well, no, because GEDmatch is just raw data. So I pull up GEDmatch and I have my code, my line code, and I just stick it in there. They don't have to do the IgG from the sheath DNA only. They're supposed to, but they don't have to. What I'm saying is that they could have easily put it in the SC profile. So unless somebody randomly is like, unless they go in, okay, so here's another possibility then. I am FBI. I'm FBI agent Teresa, and I put in the second profile of FP, because now FP has two profiles. He has one in GEDmatch, and he has one that Authrum put into GEDmatch Pro, right? There's two of them. So
one is like a quadruple the size, and the other one is the normal one.
Okay, so I'm FBI, I take that and I put in FP number 2, right? And FP number 2 matches this lady named Sarah Carbaugh, right? And so I call Sarah Carbaugh and I'm like, hey, can you send me, because I'm not supposed to be in GEDmatch, right? I'm not supposed to be in there. Hey, Sarah Carbaugh, can you send me the email you received with all of this info? Because I can see you. I can see her from my side, and she can see me from her side. We can see each other as a match, right? But I'm not supposed to be in there. So I get a hold of Sarah Carbaugh, and I'm like, hey, send me your stuff.
So
and
wait,
so she sends it to me.
Every time someone uploads into these things where you already have your DNA, you automatically get an email saying so-and-so uploaded and they're related to you?
Not all the time, but I get a lot of them, yeah.
So even if you don't do anything else?
I have a new match.
Okay.
Surreptitious connection from BK. So the other thing is they don't tell us what SC, how well SC matches FP.
Well, here's my thing. What is the reason to turn over to the defense an email that is redacting both the sender and the receiver? Unless one's like FBI or whatever, and the other is a civilian. But why would a civilian or whatever, like, when you say this is ours, I'm assuming that that's someone, let's say an FBI, letting someone else in FBI know that SC is our profile that we put in.
I think that what they're saying, this one's ours, is FP2.
Why do you think that and not SC?
Just the way that it reads.
Oh, you mean, so you're saying SC sent me a screenshot and I sent you the screenshot that SC sent me and said, this is ours that SC is matching to?
Correct.
I see.
That's what I think. That's how I read it, yeah. Or the only other way there's only two possibilities in my brain about this.
Oh, well then, okay. So then what could have happened is as soon as they put it in, based on what you just said to me about you getting your new matches, then when they put it into the regular Ged match, any of the 20,000 people who it would have matched to would have gotten an email. So any one of those 20,000 people could have emailed the police and said, I just got this new thing. I don't know if it's related to this or whatever, but it's saying that I have a match.
I don't think they would have called out of the blue, because it would have just been a random match that they wouldn't have known anything. It wouldn't have mattered to them. Like, it wouldn't show up as anything important. It would just be a regular old person who got a match. That's all it would show, unless they contacted the people from the list and said, hey, can you send us your match list? Thinking like how GEDmatch Pro, LE can see the matches, but the other ones can't see LE. Does that make sense? Like, regular folk can see the can't see the forensic profiles, but the forensic profiles can see the regular old folk that opted in. The opt-in regular folk.
Yeah.
But on regular GEDmatch, they can see each other. So I think that's what she's trying to prove, is like, I know they did this because if this was a forensic profile put in the right way, SC, regular old layman, never would have seen them.
Right.
So Othram it's taken away from Othram because Othram won't break the rules. They have their policies and procedures, and remember, they're under contract with the Idaho State Lab, or Idaho State now. So they're not going to ask Othram to break the rules. You know what I mean? So they're like, just give us back what you've got. Thank you for all of your work, and then we'll take it from here. You don't? I only have one, and I get email. And it's not mine. It's actually a lady I found her bio parents for, her bio dad, and I get emails still because it's hooked up to my email. I get emails about her still, and that was probably 4 years ago now. I did that. So I don't. I mean, there's a lot of people who have 4 brothers. I don't think we can reach to the fact that it's a Gonsalves or a Kopaka. I don't think we can go to either one of those. I mean, you're talking a 70 centimorgan. So you'd go to your chart and you'd see, okay, so who would be in the 70s? Like, who is anybody who could be in the 70s? And like, where's that normally fall? You go find your 70, and it's typically going to be a second or third cousin. You know what I mean? And I think that's what they actually determined between the 2 profiles that Othram had.
I mean, it was interesting to me, though, that she eventually then ended up saying that, like, if they would have kept following the descendants or whatever, that they wouldn't have gotten to Brian Koberger. See, I think part of the problem with, like,
oh yeah, Glenda, I got you,
being careful about what we're saying and things like that, it makes everything very confusing. So
right?
The 4 brothers situation could have been totally separate, or like a different profile. Like, I'm not
Absolutely.
understanding how they got to the 4 brothers, because what it sounds like they're saying is they did the matches or whatever. They got the matches. They followed the centimorgans. They got to this group of 4 brothers. They reached out to these 4 brothers. They said to go fuck themselves. And then whatever happened after that, they still got Brian Koberger's name, but they couldn't have kept following those 4 brothers because it would not have led to Brian Koberger.
That's what she said.
So that is what she said?
She did. She said
so then
that.
What is with the 4 brothers? Who are they?
I'm telling you, I think that somehow somebody tested the brothers. Because she says that it would have been
Maybe
a different tree. It would have come from the wrong tree, and it would not have led to Brian Koberger, which is not uncommon, because it's a third, fourth cousin. So it would have been a totally different branch, and it would have taken them to, let's say, a third cousin on the other side of the family.
Okay.
To be that type of match, like on their maternal side versus their paternal side. You see what I mean?
Right.
So they absolutely did something to test the brothers. She says it, and then they say it again about the state lab. So at least one of those brothers was tested. Without a doubt, somehow they were tested, because how would she know that it would have led to a different tree if she didn't have any info on them? Unless she built out a whole tree, which maybe she did.
Yeah,
maybe. She might have her own huge family tree. So the four brothers probably don't have anything to do with it. But I'd have to go. I'm going to go. I'll reread some of this because, like I said, I just love this stuff anyway. But they do talk about that there's these two other matches from Othram, and one of them is at a 70 centimorgan, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, when they go into here, they're also talking about the 70 centimorgan one. I think it was closer to 70 that were not in the Othram report. So I'm wondering if they got like info from the Othram report and started contacting people that were attached to that report, like attached to that person. Like,
So I wonder if that one led to the four brothers.
Or led to SC.
It's just a mess.
Right. I'll try to build
and her with the whole, it was just like a big cardboard hand-drawn tree. I was like, what the fuck?
That's not uncommon. Like if the other thing I thought was weird is she says that they actually built it in family tree. That doesn't seem like somebody who typically builds. Like I've always learned,
because they don't.
We don't use family tree for like actual like genealogy, like investigative genealogy projects. That's not what you're taught to use. So that's kind of interesting. I mean, for like me going, like if you wanted to find your birth dad, I would use Ancestry. Like she's saying, I would use Ancestry or 23andMe. Like that makes sense to me. So I don't know. I'll go back and try to make a little chart and see if it makes more sense with a visual aid.
That would be helpful.
So I'm back on. Sorry, I had streaming issues. So on that order that we were talking about a bit ago, on footnote 2, it mentions that there were 25 search warrants part of the investigation from December 23rd, 2022 and August of 2023. What was the date of the murders?
November 13th, 2022.
Okay, so, and then in the body where they had that footnote, these misrepresentations or omissions, according to defendant, affected the validity of 17 different search warrants. So I'm guessing between those two things that's how you guys were able to determine that much of this relates to IGG.
I don't know which order are you referring to?
This is order on defendant's motion for Frank's hearing.
Oh, okay, what page?
And then on page 1, footnote 2.
Okay. Was accompanied by a memorandum in support of the Franks hearing and a USB containing exhibits filed November 18th, 2024, right? The court subsequently issued an order requesting that defendant file an amended memorandum containing specific cites to the record and revise his original exhibits to include only those relevant.
That's footnote 3. It's footnote 2.
Oh, 2. Sorry. I saw a 2 there. Let me just tell you that. There was a total of 25 search warrants issued in this investigation between December 23rd, 2022 and August 1st of 2023. For each issue analyzed in this order, the court has identified the date range for those specific warrants defendants' claims are implicated. So they did a ton of search warrants and ended on like December 6th, all different days in December, and then they had to go back and ask for more. So I don't know if that's what this is about. I don't know.
Well, this kind of dovetails into what your guest day before yesterday during the afternoon. You were in a good dialogue with her. Again, I forget her name and her channel.
Lana from Truth and Transparency.
Thank you. So she's very adamant, and many of her arguments and her recounting the arguments of the defense attorney was that putting these pieces together, what the state knew and what they were covering up or what they had to do to go and cover their tracks, so to speak, was because of dates. And she said, at this point in time, they knew this, and then, that showed that so much more. And then in these arguments, this testimony, you and Sluthia both indicated that, yeah, she argued that it's important to know who knew it and when, because that tells you certain things. So here they've mentioned that, and I haven't read this yet, but over the next 36 pages from this point, he's going to mark and indicate for each issue analyzed in this order, the court has identified the date range for the specific warrants, because that's going to fit into what the discussion with your guest was, that
Yeah, I got you.
there was
Because
this
everything after
evolution. So
everything after the 19th would be gone. If you get rid of the IGG, they would never be able to get any of these other warrants to search properties, to search vehicles, to arrest Brian, anything along those lines. Look at his phone, look at his computers. Any of that stuff would all be thrown out because the IGG is gone.
So, I mean, are these 25 search warrants and the affidavits in support thereof, are they all collected in one place somewhere, or are some sealed and others not? Or do we know?
Well, there's like a mix of,
Okay.
like, even the ones I do have them. The ones that we do have, though, like, a lot of what they were arguing was the affidavits that were submitted for them, and those I do not have.
Okay, that's really the crux of the matter. It's the affidavits in support of,
Yes.
because that's what a Franks is looking at. They don't look at the warrant, which just, it's where the judge signs and where the judge indicates what items you can look for and what items you can seize. The affidavit sets out the probable cause, and that's the thing that the court's looking at. Did they lie about this, or did they knowingly and intentionally, or with reckless disregard for the truth, use false statements, or omissions were necessary to finding a probable cause. Anyway, sorry to interrupt, but that answered my question.
So, the good thing about this case, Travis, is that everything that is public is actually very easily accessible. On the, like, I typically just go to like the Idaho website or Idaho cases of interest, and it literally pops up, and you can go in and you can click on any of the things that are open for the public. But there's hundreds and hundreds of documents now, but it's very clean, and anything that is sealed with like, this still exists, but it's sealed. This still exists, and this was filed this date, but it's sealed for XYZ. It's actually, I mean, it's kind of refreshing coming from Delphi looking at this case on the CCS anyway.
Yeah, it's a nice contrast, and it's nice to see, for people to feel confident that Delphi is way, way out of the ordinary in terms of the way the court dealt with the filings and whatnot, and that by having transparency and having everything out there doesn't, regardless of which side of the issue you're on, it doesn't take away from the dignity of the victims or their families. And I don't know how things got so misconstrued in the Richard Allen case. I suspect it may have been by some creators maybe thinking that weren't really familiar with the criminal process and explaining what they thought about it, or what they thought was appropriate to put in that Franks motion. And, that there were just a lot of misconceptions about, that's unethical to put that in the Franks motion, or and it just really wasn't. But I'm just glad people, regardless of which side you're on in either case, can see there is a way to manage this information. There is a way to handle this information in just, horrific cases. And, but it allows the public to follow what's going on. So, there aren't all of these unnecessary questions. Tell me what we know. I know there, obviously these Franks motions and motions to suppress. So they're getting search warrants, and I saw some documentary, our show, and can't remember who did it, Dateline or whatnot. We all know how in-depth their coverage is, but it was basically, these 4 people, a lot of partying at that house.
They were full on college sorority girls. Like, they were full on partying a lot. It was, they were living on their own and off-campus housing and having a good time. There's definitely a lot of people in and out of that house.
God
100%.
bless them. I remember I missed those days. Anyway, so then they somehow get latched on to Kohlberger in some way, and then he's heading back to Florida, and I can't remember how in depth it is. And so now I'm getting back up to speed, but what was the I'll call smoking gun that they obtained that gave them enough to arrest him? Was it through this DNA?
Yeah. Well, so the fact that they were looking for this white Elantra, even though it was the wrong years, that's the first kind of little minuscule part. And then they get the DNA off the sheet. They do the IgG, and then the FBI calls it a tip. And so then they travel to Pennsylvania when they figure out that he's in Pennsylvania. They do some surveillance. They get the trash, which is also part of what she wants suppressed, but he had denied. And they get the trash, and then they come out with a paternal match, because the trash actually has his dad's DNA in it. So they come out with a paternal match. They know that there's only one son because he has 2 sisters, and there's only 3 of them. So he's the only possible, because they know the DNA they have is male. So this is kind of the state's narrative on that whole thing. Now, there's people who say that before the IgG, they were already on to Brian Kohlberger. I'm going to tell you guys, and you guys can absolutely disagree with me. My struggle with that is she wants everything thrown out because of the IgG. And if she had won, the state's case would be gone. They'd have nothing. Right? So if they knew about him and were on to him beforehand, why wouldn't they say that when everything that was done then, they already actually knew who they were looking for? I'm just putting this out there in the world. Like, you guys tell me your thought process on that, because a lot of people say they knew about BK before the IgG. But why would they deny knowing about him when it would benefit them?
I don't have any opinion, because I 100% do not believe that they knew anything about him or cared anything about him until after they got his name.
That's what I think too, because
I always thought that. Now it's quite clear. I mean, they say it. They didn't know who he was until December 19th.
And it would benefit them if they actually did know who he was, if he was on their radar prior, because then this whole fruit of the poisonous tree stuff with IgG, if it did get kicked out by a judge, they would have other investigative material to say, no, this is what we had, and it would have led us to him anyway. I almost feel like it would benefit them to have known about him beforehand.
So was it initially the swab from the 9th sheet that got them to him, and then
Yes.
Pennsylvania and the trash.
Yeah, basically, they did whatever they did with the IgG from the knife sheath
Which
swab.
was found at the crime scene.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
So they were given then the name Brian Koberger, and then they went to Pennsylvania and they stole the trash and compared the trash DNA to the sheath DNA and found out it was a paternal match. So it was the
Mhm.
father's DNA of the sheath DNA. And then they arrested Brian Koberger.
So in the PCA, they wrote a bunch of. I'm sorry, you guys. Just want a heads up. I have 5 minutes before I have to leave. So just FYI, because I got to go pick up a kid. But so they wrote in the PCA all the things that had come in about Brian prior to. So there was a couple people at the other campus who had called in about a white Elantra. So they added that to the PCA, but I don't think they actually went back and got any of that info and pulled it out until after they knew who it was. And then they went back to see what else they had gotten in tips or whatever else. But I don't think they were even looking at him.
So they weren't. When they got his name, they then looked at what car he had. Then they looked up if he had gotten any tickets. Then they got his cell phone number and they got the AT&T warrant. Like none of those things, like without the tree, they would not have been compelled to go get any of those other things. That's the
Right.
whole point.
That's what I think. So, and then DB even said that some of the people, the theory is that they would have to hide the information that they had about BK because it was confidential information and they would have credibility issues or involvement in the crime. And so they're hiding the fact that they knew about him. Other people are saying, like a confidential informant gave his name and found out he drove a white Elantra. So like maybe the information that they had prior and that's kind of slipping through the cracks in some of the motions that people are looking at is leading people to believe that there's these other people who turned him in possibly.
So one of the things is that this has been going on since like the first motions came through when the defense would put in requests for discovery and they were just very what do they call it when they're like just like basically a template that they use for everything? Boilerplate. It would be like a boilerplate request for discovery. And in that, so if you look at like what's discoverable in Idaho, it'll list, say, 20 different things. One of those things is the names of any informants, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
So when they filed this boilerplate motion asking for that, all the things, it didn't necessarily mean those things existed, but they were asking because that's what they're entitled to under like Idaho trial rules.
Right.
But people saw the words like confidential, the names of any confidential informants, and then at one point the state was arguing that the IgG stuff were considered like that the people whose names appeared on the tree were considered confidential informants.
Yeah, you can't do that because it'll stay at the top, produce these items 1 through 20, just like you said, Sleuthie. And like number 1 will be all statements of the defendant, whether recorded, written, when there hasn't been any state. And then to look at that and say, oh, he must have confessed.
Right.
It's wrong. It's just 20 standard things. If you have time, can you answer me this last question?
Sure.
So several times in chat, people were commenting. Day before yesterday, there was some commenting. In the transcript, there was comments about, okay, well, we're not planning to use this DNA / genealogy testing at trial.
Correct.
Tell me about that.
So all they want to do is say they received a tip that said to, hey, go check into this guy, Brian Koberger, from the FBI. And then they went to go check in on Brian Koberger. They did the surveillance. He was doing weird shit. Like Glenda said something like, why wasn't his DNA found in the trash? Well, he was like found in the house, like bagging his trash in little baggies with while he had gloves on. And then he was also seen while being surveilled, taking his trash to like other neighbors' trash cans. So they're saying that essentially they got a tip from the FBI that led them to go look at further into Brian Koberger, and they found all this stuff out about that he had the white Elantra, and then they are doing the surveillance, and he's acting weird. He cleaned his car, and then he parks it in the garage, and just so on and so forth. So they're saying it's just a tip. It was just a tip, and we used it, and we went and did all the investigation that we had to do.
Gotcha. So we're not.
T,
gonna,
I sent you the.
Oh,
Wait
go
a minute.
ahead.
I sent you the link to the thing in the private chat. It's the very bottom of page 5 and then into page 6 for the answer to this.
Okay.
And then I've been informed by Detective J.R. Talbot of the Idaho State Police that on November 13th, a sheath was recovered at the King Road residence under or next to the body of Madison Mogan. The Idaho State Crime Lab obtained a male DNA profile, considered the suspect profile, from the sheath. This is also referred to in Sergeant Blaker's sworn statement Exhibit A. On December 27th of 2022, law enforcement officers in Pennsylvania recovered trash that originated from the Koberger family residence. That trash was sent to the Idaho State Crime Lab for testing. On December 28th of 2022, the Idaho State Lab reported that a DNA profile was obtained from the trash. It was compared to the suspect DNA. The lab personnel concluded that the source of the trash DNA profile was a male and was not being excluded as the biological father of the source of the suspect profile. At least 99.9998% of the male population would be expected to be excluded from the possibility of being the biological father of the source of the suspect profile. I am specifically asking the court to not consider this supplemental disclosure as evidence supporting the existence of probable cause. The reason for this request is that if the DNA test results are held inadmissible at some point, such a ruling would not impact the finding of probable cause for this arrest, so long as this court is satisfied as to the probable cause regardless of the DNA test results. Can you send that to
You
Travis?
guys know what's going on there, right? I mean,
they know it's bad because they know they went about it the wrong way on how they got it. But now that's out in the open and the judge doesn't care that the FBI went about it shady. It's all on record, and the judge is like, doesn't matter, because even if it violates all these things, that's in-house, that the FBI violated their own rules. And 2, privacy violations of other parties have nothing to do with Brian Koberger. The privacy of those other parties needs to take it up with the FBI. It's outside of this case. So, but I'm really sorry. I've got to end it, and I've got to go. But otherwise, I'm going to be late, and she's going to be standing outside. So
Don't be late.
Can you send that to Travis, though?
I did.
Okay, perfect.
I got it, and that's very helpful. And thank you for having me. And
always thank you for coming up and helping. And Sleuthy, I hope you feel better. Love you. Let me know if I help with anything.
Okay.
All right, I will see you guys tomorrow. I have no idea what we're covering or what the hell we're talking about, but we'll see. Maybe I'll have time to make a graphic on this and I can go over it. But I want to make no promises because tomorrow's pretty busy around here. So love you guys. Thank you. Thank you to everybody who was here. As always, I know you guys have 1,000 other places you could spend your time, but you
kicked out of most of those.
Love you all. See you later.
Love you. Bye.
Love you. Bye.
Good night.
Do you dare to follow me down? Head into the unknown. Down the rabbit hole. head into the unknown.